Ready.
That's cool. Sit down, Kevin. Good morning. Welcome to the June 4th, 2019 Board of Commissioner meeting. Please silence your cell phones, pagers, and other electronic communication devices. Agendas are located at the back of the chambers on the shelves there. And the commission now utilizes the speaker request forms. If you'd like to speak on an item, please complete a speaker request form located in the bookshelves in the back of the chambers and return it to the commission office manager, Holly Hennies, located on the lower right side of the dais here. First, we'll have a moment of silent reflection and then pledge allegiance led by Commissioner LaCroix, please.
Thank you. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First, we'll have a review and approval of the agenda, please. Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Drews,
Second.
second by DeSanto. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed? Motion carries. Ms. Holly, please.
Good morning, Commissioners. For public notice, the Board of Commissioners uses a consent agenda to act on non-controversial and routine items. The consent agenda is acted upon by one motion and vote of the Board. Items may be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda at the request of a board member or a citizen. Today's consent agenda contains the following items. Approval of the minutes from the regular meeting of May 21st, 2019. The next three are all to schedule a public hearing at 9:15 a.m. on June 18th, 2019. The first is for Budget Supplement SP 19-012 for the Motorola lease purchase interest budget. The next is Budget Supplement SP 19-013 for the E911 fund budget. And the third is Budget Supplement SP 19-014 for the Accumulated Building Fund bond principal budget. Number 9 is to acknowledge the filing of petitions signed by at least 25% of the eligible voters within the proposed district and to set an election date on the question of the formation of the Stonecrest Road District to be held on July 21st, 2019 as submitted by the auditor. Number 10 is to accept the withdrawal of the application for an isolated tract by Mr. Robert and Mrs. Barbara Steele and terminate any further proceedings regarding the application. Number 11 is to acknowledge the recommendation for appointment of Mr. Rich Marsh and Mr. Jeffrey Wiggin to the Pennington County Planning Commission for a term of 3 years. Number 12 is to acknowledge the recommendation for review of the compensation study. Request for proposal from Gallagher is submitted by the Compensation Committee. And finally, number 13 is to authorize one Glock G17 Gen 4 duty weapon to be declared as surplus for the purpose of commendation by the Sheriff's Office. And at this time, I guess I will respectfully request that we pull number 11 from the consent calendar, please.
Thank you, Ms. Holly. Is there any item from the members of the public who wish to remove any items from the consent agenda besides number 11? Is there any Board of Commissioners who wish to remove any items from the consent agenda for further discussion?
Madam Chair.
Commissioner LaCroix, please.
Item 12 and 13, please.
12 and 13, okay. So can we have an acknowledgement and a motion on the rest of the agendas besides 11, 12, and 13, please?
Move to approve.
Moved by DeSanto,
Second.
second by Drews. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. Number 11, we do have a speaker request form, Travis Lassiter. And this is, on this today, guys, this is an acknowledgement for the recommendation. The appointments and the people will not be showing up till next week. And I don't know if Mr. Lassiter still wants to speak, but that would be up to him. At this point, this is a recommendation. This isn't the appointment of the people that put in their applications besides you, sir. So
Yes, ma'am. My name's Travis Lassiter, and I would just like to bring it to the board's attention that I'm interested in continuing to serve a second term on the commission, on the planning commission. I will be here on the June 18th meeting to give a presentation if that is so what the board would like to hear at that moment in time, unless you have any questions for me at this moment.
Any questions?
I highly encourage you to do so.
I will be.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you, Travis.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner LaCroy.
I just want to give a little history on the process to
Yes,
some
sir.
of the new board members and so forth. You know, we used to do these, you do the interviews from the dais and so forth. And the commission at the time decided to change it to where we make a committee to be able to sit down and have good conversations with the applicants. It's kind of tough to do it from here. And so that's the whole reason why that process is put into place, and I think it's a good one. I mean, I think you get some good one-on-one conversations with everybody, and you get some good feelings. So I just, you know, Travis, I didn't know if you knew, we switched that, I think it was about 2 years ago,
Yes, sir.
wasn't it, Holly?
2017, yes.
Yeah, so I just wanted to update the new commissioners and so forth, that's the process that we put into place. And hopefully it works out well.
Thank you, Commissioner LaCroy. Mr. Lassiter, if that's okay, next week will be fine. If you want to come with the other applicants and kind of speak.
2 weeks.
2 weeks, sorry, 2 weeks.
Ma'am, thank you very much.
18th. Thank you, sir.
Thanks for showing up today, Travis.
Yeah, thanks, Travis.
Do we have a motion on number 11? Or never mind. Yes, we do. Do you have a motion for number 11?
Move for approval.
Thank you, Mr. LaCroy. Second
Second.
by Drews. Motion by LaCroy, second by Commissioner Drews. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All
Aye.
opposed? Everybody say aye. Oh,
Aye
okay.
for the first part. Aye,
You
too.
fit
I
that
was a
in
little
then.
late.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, sir. Number 12, Commissioner LaCroy, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. John, I just wanted to recognize when I was going through the report that this is a new company that we haven't used before, and I was reading through it, and it seems very good. I was just wanting to see what your thoughts are and a little information from you on it.
John Morrill, Human Resource Director for Pennington County. I would say also, sir, that they're a very reputable firm. I've worked with them over the past few years when they've done surveys for other entities, Burley County in North Dakota, so again, the capital county. They've worked with Cass County over in Fargo, so again, the largest metropolitan area in North Dakota. They've also worked with other entities in Minnesota that I've partnered with in the past. Very reputable. We asked all the firms to sharpen their pencils a little bit, and they came back with a reduced rate as well. We've got some homework to finish up on, but I think they'll do a bang-up job for us. I really do.
Commissioner LaCroy.
John, could you explain to the public a little bit about what
Oh, sure.
what this is for
Process.
and what we're going through?
You bet. No, thank you for that opportunity. So the goal at this point is to revisit the compensation structure, the job duties, responsibilities of all county employees, including elected officials, every 4 to 5 years. That's what we committed to back in 2015. Thus, the reason of us seeking proposals and actually looking to do that same analysis this year. What we'll do is actually compare internally positions to make sure that we're fairly compensated. There's some parity or equity, if you will, between positions in the county that do similar types of tasks, but it also does a comparison then to outside entities, so to the public sector, or excuse me, the private sector, with regard to other communities similar to Pennington County, similar cities, if you will, to Rapid City, those types of things, but they will select other comparable entities that will have a voice in selecting, that will give us some solid information to say, yep, we're being paid fairly and equitably, or there needs to be some changes. And they will also help us identify positions internally that may need to be changed just upon the changes in those functions and responsibilities and knowledge level that's required for our employees. They will also take a look at the benefit offering that we have and compare that to other entities to make sure that we're taking great care of our employees. I believe we are. This will verify that and or give us some other information to help us be better.
Thank you, John. That was one of the biggest things that I think this study is going to do is we're going to take a look at some of the jobs. Some job descriptions change over time. So, and that's one of the, I think, one of the most important things that I read through this that they do. So,
Any other
appreciate it.
questions for John about the compensation?
No, I think you did a great job explaining.
Do we have a motion on number 12, please?
Move for approval.
Second.
Moved by LaCroy, second by Drews. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Item 13.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. 13, Commissioner LaCroy.
I had this pulled to recognize the service, the 25 years service of Matt Sargent. I didn't know if Kevin wanted to say anything more. You give it the handgun as part of the recognition of the time of service and so forth, and I just wanted to pull it from the consent agenda so we could acknowledge that.
Thank you. I also would like to recognize Matt Sargent. He's been our commissioner deputy for a long time, and we appreciate everything he's done. Good man, always took care of us, and just good sense of humor as well. So we've enjoyed him being with us this many years, and he's close to our heart here at the commission and what he's done for us all these years. So we appreciate him as well. So thank you.
I'd make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Mr.
Second.
Drews. Motion by Drews, second by DeSanto. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. Next, we're on regular agenda items, 14 through 19. Number 14, updates on recent May storms, local flooding conditions, emergency management. Dustin Willett first, please. Director Dustin Willett. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Commission. Dustin Willett, Pennington County Emergency Manager. Let me pull up the presentation that you also have in front of you. Commission Chair Hadcock asked me to put together a presentation for the Commission
And the public.
and the public. Yes, ma'am. Yes,
Thank you,
ma'am.
Dustin. Thank you for being here, Dustin.
Oh, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. All right, looks like we're about warmed up there, so I'll just go ahead and lead off here. So what brought us to this point? We've had multiple precipitation events. Obviously, going back, it's been a very, very wet spring for us, but the specific ones we're dealing with right now started about May 20th, and they go through including, another thunderstorm that moved through the area yesterday. So now we're in that mode of dodging thunderstorms. May 20th period, May 20th, May 21st, May 22nd, we saw precipitation in the form of rain in the lower elevations, but above about 4,000 feet. So if you think about climbing out of the Red Racetrack Valley, so when you pop up out of Reptile Gardens, one direction or the other, typically as you were moving up into that Rockerville area above Bear Country, the snow accumulations were significant. They were 15, 17, 19 inches of snow in various elevations above 4,000 feet. So very heavy wet snow that caused some, again, transportation infrastructure issues that we'll go over. Later on the 28th, we had some stations that broke all-time records for rain during that period. So we've had, and there'll be some slides coming up on how much rain we saw. The other issue with this is, obviously, we had a discussion about the 164th Bridge and the flooding that occurred and the ice jams that we had. All those precipitation events, snow events, rain events saturated our ground. So when this round of precipitation came through, our ground was already really soaked. And about that. For most of these periods, bless you, for most of these periods, the EOC was activated for about one operational period. Basically, when things were really happening, the EOC stands up. We primarily stand up for situational awareness and common operating picture, just so that people can call in reports and we can disseminate reports. We have more than 20 volunteer fire departments in Pennington County, and so they're all looking at their own districts, and all of their districts were impacted. So when Battle Creek and Hill City and Rockerville and Rapid Valley and Interior and Wall, when all those folks are dealing with their own flooding and their own impacts, sometimes they don't exactly have time to pay attention to what's happening across the rest of the county. So the Emergency Operations Center is a place where we can look at all the different response disciplines, all the different public works, all the private nonprofits, and kind of get a good sense of what those impacts are across the whole community and get a picture of what's happening in Pennington County, not just a little part of Pennington County. We try to develop that whole picture. We also have some really good public warning tools at our disposal. So we worked with several of those local jurisdictions to provide targeted public warnings, primarily through those wireless emergency alerts. We're able to target cell phones based on a particular tower. And so we can target messages in terms of dangerous road closures, especially ones that occur after darkness has fallen and fell, and people might not be able to see or know that those road closures are there. So we did some messaging for Hill City, Chief Craig Comer up there as well. So just a graphic representation of what our ground moistures were, and this is June, and then going back about 14 days from current. So these are our estimates of ground moisture content, basically the top 4 or 5 feet of the soil, and you can see here that we're 99 to 100% saturated. There is no more capacity in our soil almost across entire Pennington County to absorb any water. So basically that means any water that falls is going to end up running somewhere into a drainage. The ground simply cannot absorb any more water. And that's where we're sitting currently. Currently our ground is just incredibly saturated. It's a snapshot of precipitation over the last 14 days, a national image, and you can see we're not quite as bad as South Central, where they got a whole bunch of purple, but this next snapshot, and I understand the layer might be hard to see, but that little section of lavender there is right smack dab over Rapid City and just to the north of us. So you can see, again, that graph on the side, those are inches of rain over that period, and we're seeing some of those places locally in Pennington County that are pushing that 7, 8, 9, even up into 10 inches of rain. So that's a whole heck of a lot of water coming down in a relatively short period of time over incredibly saturated ground, which leads us to results. And just a couple of collages here. I won't spend much time on this. About that snow event wreaked havoc. It was hard to keep plows on the road. It was hard to keep ambulances on the road. We ended up with down trees from the heavy wet snow over several major transportation arteries. That's a shot of the Cheyenne River by the Wasta Rest area. So that's I-90 as it leaves the Wasta area and up into a wall there off in the distance. So that's what the Cheyenne River looked like at the Wasta Rest area. And then that other side is recent evacuations from Melody Lane Mobile Home Park. So that's South Valley Drive, right where Rapid Creek crosses it. We use that kind of as a barometer in the area. That South Valley Drive bridge over Rapid Creek is our first bridge typically in the Rapid Creek drainage that gets impacted. So that's the first spot typically that we see water over the road, water over the bridge, water impacting the bridge from Rapid Creek. And as that water climbs, you can see debris actually coming over the top of the road there. And then just to the back of that is that Melody Lane Mobile Home Park that we ended up doing some evacuations on. The Red Cross actually stood up a shelter for a few of those folks. And while we didn't utilize it, the fairgrounds actually had made available. We had some people with some calves and some other large animals that were thinking about having to move those animals, and the fairgrounds was standing ready to take those. So we had a lot of things in place, and a lot of things actually that were executed. Just a couple other pictures, and I'm sure Highway Department, Joe and his crew will talk about some of these specific things, but this is a culvert washout within Pennington County, and then the other picture there is the driveway up to a resort in Keystone. And the issue there is that's the only egress for vehicles into that resort. They had multiple guests there, 30 plus rooms full. So we had some issues with bus tours that were away from the resort, with people that had all their medications back in the resort, and trying to coordinate how do we get these people hooked up with their medications and their belongings and other things. So those are the types of events that the Sheriff's Office was point in Keystone and really helping out this area and this operation. So the Sheriff's Office did a fantastic job up there as well, keeping folks safe and navigating some of the issues that were brought up there. But that's Battle Creek as it comes down the Old Hill City Road into Keystone. So this is Spring Creek, and this is a very good example picture. That's Spring Creek Road, neck yoke off in the distance. You can see the Founding Fathers building off there in the background. But the reason I brought this up is some people will question why we close bridges when we close bridges. And again, Highway might speak more in depth on this. But the issue is once that water gets high enough where it starts impacting that structure, it's not just the hydrologic force against the side of that bridge. Anything significant floating down that channel is now going to impact that structure. So it's not just that the water is lapping at the underside of the bridge, it's that when you get large debris floating down, that large debris, one is going to impact and two is going to pile up. So that all of those factors play into when those bridges get shut down in terms of safety for the traveling public. And then that's Grizzly Gulch and Keystone up there by the chainsaw art, you know, that corner up there as you're coming down into that. And that's another, in Keystone, that's typically one of our first structures that gets impacted. And the issue there is depending on how far up the Grizzly Gulch drainage that impact is, hopefully residents and emergency services are able to access the Grizzly Gulch area from the top, but sometimes even that gets shut down. So we can, one of the issues with Grizzly Gulch in Keystone is we can end up with address points that are cut off, and I'll speak about that in just a minute. And then we have some other transportation infrastructure issues. Investigation is still ongoing into the sinkhole here in Rapid City, but if we're talking about geologic formations and gypsum and potential dissolving of that water obviously plays a key part into why we might have seen that open up during this particular period. Obviously that didn't all happen within the last week or two, but something obviously reached a tipping point and caused that to open up in the middle of this super wet period. And then I'm sure County Highway is going to speak extensively about Wilsey Road up there. This is above Pedro, so the absolute tip of Pennington County, about as far away as you can get from anything. And that's the Cheyenne River that you can see in the corner there, and that landslide issue as the river continues to impact that bank and slide that mass of earth in is causing some really significant transportation infrastructure impacts there. And there's at least one address point post that. You can access it from Hockin County, but not very easily. So there's some access issues there that will have to be worked through. Spring Creek, again, this is the Arena Drive, so the entrance to Hart Ranch. Obviously, we have a lot of people in Hart Ranch, and nobody in recent memory can remember Spring Creek actually inundating and going over Arena Drive. So this was really a concern for us. It got several inches deep and was moving with a fair degree of velocity, but this was concerning. The only emergency ingress-egress to Hart Ranch, if we lose Arena Drive there, is basically a muddy two-track across a field out to Highway 79. So significant issue there with hundreds and potentially thousands of people in Hart Ranch at any given time, especially during this season. So the things I'm going to talk about in the next series of slides are isolated address points, which bring us ingress-egress issues, crossing moving water, groundwater in basements, sandbag requests, and the releases from Pactola Dam. And I'll cover those just as quickly as I can. Here's a nice aerial view of what we were seeing from Spring Creek, and that's that housing development that's accessed the Mulligan Mile. Hart Ranch is off in the distance there, but you can see that Spring Creek Road was impacted by Spring Creek. The road that accesses all those houses, the bridge, the Mulligan Mile Bridge, was closed. So really the only access into those homes was at the very end of that little court, and there's not really a full road there, but we could access that into Hart Ranch or Arena Drive. But then as Arena Drive became impacted, all of these address points start becoming into question in terms of emergency ingress-egress. That's our primary concern, is if somebody has an issue there, how do we get into them, and then how do we get them out? And each first responder organization, each discipline, gets together basically and comes up with plans in terms of, hey, how are we going to access these people in different situations, whether it's the use of non-traditional ingress egress routes. Are there 2 tracks? Are there tracked vehicles? Is the weather conducive to flying? Can we get a helicopter in there? All those different things. It's a very dynamic, very fluid situation, but the first responders are always looking at these situations, figuring out how they're going to get emergency ingress egress. We're not really looking at mass evacuations unless we're looking at the potential of that river coming up so far that we're actually going to start impacting those structures directly with water. If that's the case, then we certainly have other operational issues that we look at. But in a situation like this, where we're not expecting that water to make it all the way over to the houses, it's more of a shelter in place and how are we going to handle case by case emergency ingress egress. Water rescue team is often called in these situations to make sure we're doing things right and safely and add that measure of capability. There's a similarity to this with blizzards. I mean, these houses are isolated. People can't get out. That causes a lot of anxiety with people when they know that people can't get in and they can't get out. We get people that call, the public gets very concerned about, hey, I can't get in and out of my house and I want to get out. I want somebody to come get me. That puts a lot of people at risk, and it's very, very similar to, I guess that didn't come. I had a picture of Winter Storm Atlas there from 2013, where, you know, we had 6 feet of snow across all the roads in the neighborhood. You could just see the tops of cars. Nobody's getting in and out in that situation either. So there are a lot of similarities there of, hey, you're stuck. In a day or two, access will be much better. And so that really relates back to our message of you got to be prepared. You have to be prepared to be self-sufficient, have medications, have food and water, have the things you need in order to shelter in place where you're at and survive for a day or two. Bless you. Until we can get, until things improve and we can get to you. These are very temporary situations for us, and we'll get to that in one of the last slides. But this doesn't stay this way for very long. So it's usually a temporary ingress egress issue, and we really, unless you're in imminent danger or suffering some type of medical emergency or there's a compelling reason, really a lot of times the best outcome here is to be able to shelter in place. So crossing moving water, that is one of our mantras, along with be prepared, along with that, have that 3-day emergency kit that applies to multiple different disaster scenarios. Turn around, don't drown. We say it, FEMA says it, the National Weather Service says it, everybody says it, and there's a reason. This is where we see our flood deaths, typically across the country, and certainly here as well. People trying to cross moving water, whether in vehicles or whether walking, running, biking, it doesn't matter. People try to cross moving water. In this particular situation, and this is a great example of why we say that, turn around, don't drown, is somebody coming up to that in a larger vehicle might look and say, well, heck, there's only a few inches of water over the top of this roadway. And it looks like there's only a few inches of water over the top of this roadway. But if we remember those pictures of the washed out culvert, all that material can wash out. That pavement is still intact, but there's absolutely nothing underneath it. And so as you start across that surface in 6 inches of water, all of a sudden you're over something where there's zero material underneath you. You pop through that pavement, and luckily this person is still alive to tell the tale thanks to the work of first responders to extricate them from that vehicle. But a great example of why we say turn around, don't drown, not only for the risk to the traveling public, but then for the risk and the jeopardy that we put our first responders in to effect those rescues. And then just those facts that we always put out. And I ran the water rescue dive rescue team for about 6 years. I was on that team for even longer, a swift water specialist. And we always, you kind of laugh at 6 inches of fast moving water can knock over an adult. Yes, it can. Obviously, in the swift water rescue team, we put that to the challenge. We all think we're bigger, badder, and tougher than the water. And we think 6 inches of water is nothing. And so we find 6 inches of really, really, really fast moving water. And sure enough, the numbers are right. So pay attention to them. 12 inches of water can float and wash away a vehicle. For people that saw the rescue that happened after this with the Jeep that was washed off the road, the rescuers are standing in not moving water, very slow moving water, up to about their calves, and that was enough to float that smaller vehicle off the road. So And then that 24 inches, it's covered by that little icon there, but 24 inches of rushing water carries away larger vehicles. So even if you have a big four-wheel drive vehicle or a larger profile vehicle, 2 feet of water that's moving quickly will exert an incredible amount of pressure on that. Not only is it lateral force of the water moving against it, but it's the buoyant force of that water floating up on the structure of the vehicle. Oh, why that's, this saved the wrong. Great, that's awesome.
Well, we do have our handouts.
You do have handouts. Let me,
From basement water.
you know, would it work if Joe came up and gave his presentation, and I'll go get the rest of my slides, and I'll finish up at the end? Adapt and overcome. Any questions on the presentation thus far, and then I'll come back and finish up.
I got one question,
Yes, sir.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner
Okay,
Ross,
so
can I
in that
please?
photo, I see barricades on both ends, right?
I believe so.
So my philosophy is you can't fix stupid. I mean, you got the barricades on both ends. What else are you gonna do?
Yeah, kindler, gentler emergency manager. We message as much as we can message. We try to provide as much justification for our messaging as we can. But at the end of the day, controlling human behavior is challenging at best. So I will be back in front of you in a minute.
Okay, your name, sir?
Good morning, Commission. Joe Miller, Pennington County Highway Superintendent. So I definitely don't have one as nice as Dustin. He's doing a very good job there. He kind of dives deeper into the numbers, and we got a couple pictures to show you from some of our more, I guess,
Challenges.
challenge or tougher challenges, I guess, that we're going to have to overcome. Yeah, I gave you guys a handout before the meeting here. This is one of our biggest hurdles we're going to have to overcome here in this month. You know, currently there's 5 or 6 residences back beyond this point of where the road washed out. Dustin kind of touched on it. He's got a very early picture of what that slide looks like right now. This is Mark and I were out there yesterday afternoon, and this is what that road looks like currently. As you can tell, it's grown over the last week. The Cheyenne River is a very powerful body of water, fast-moving water when it's flowing this full, and it washed the earth away. As you can see, that's me standing there. I'm about 5 foot 8 foot or 5 foot 8 inches tall there. So I think we estimated it probably 25 or 30 feet deep. That landslide kind of shows it a little better there. And then there's nowhere the hurdle that we're going to have to overcome is there's nowhere to move the road. That's not going to get washed out again in the next, could be a year from now, or it could be 5 years from now. We don't know. We have a meeting set up with the West River Electric. There's a rural water line that runs up here to this side of the power line, and then Golden West tomorrow morning to try and figure out a game plan for some temporary access for the 5 families that are back there. We can hopefully build a temporary access, a little further up the ridge there, and get those families temporary access so they can get their mail and emergency services and propane and stuff, and while we come up with a game plan for a permanent solution. That's all I got on the Wilsey Road. Is there any questions on that?
When's the next time you're gonna be going up there, Joe?
We're going up there tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow morning?
Yes.
Okay.
So we have a meeting on site with West River Electric and the utility companies at 8:30 tomorrow morning.
So the reason basically that you can't move the road uphill is because of that water line?
Well, if you go back to this is kind of the map here. I know I took a screenshot on my phone when I was up there. This is the road right here.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 weeks ago, that Cheyenne River was, a couple hundred yards away from that roadway. So in just 2 weeks' time, it ate into that road. So, if we still keep getting the high water, all of this road along here is going to be at risk for doing the same thing in the future.
Is that particular area of the road there a higher risk area for washing away than other areas along the road? looks like that's where the Cheyenne River gets closest to that road.
Correct.
So could we build an abutment that would protect that road from washing away?
I guess in my opinion, I don't think so with the Cheyenne River. As full as it is, we're going to put our crews in danger trying to do that. Is it possible? I won't say it's not possible, but I don't think that's
I mean,
a
when
good
we come
option.
to the permanent solution, could we put cement in there or something like that that would prevent future wash away?
That would be a possibility. I think, it'd be a very expensive option. We talked about building a road here when the 164th bridge washed out. I think that's a viable option. It's some pretty rough country. To build a road up through here, you're talking, I think Mark and I estimated at least 2 miles, might be a little longer. Your costs are going to go up from that $25 a foot. So it's a rough estimate without getting into the survey and figuring out exactly where that permanent road's going to be. The good news is I think we do have a temporary solution figured out for.
Yes, and basically geologically, you want to look what the cracks and stuff in that area or that land there on the one picture that you show where it dropped, that you wouldn't want to put a road anywhere back by it. Because if it's doing it there and then the water's going to come up and probably seep into that 35-foot drop is what I'm going to guess and start dropping it some more.
And talking to Mark, we about, what do you say, 100 yards to the south of this, Mark? We put in a culvert here. I'll let Mark explain it.
Or Chalk, Pennington County Highway. Could you go back to that next slide, or that last slide, the first one, Joe? Yes, this bend in the river has moved probably 100 yards over the last several years. But if you look to the north of the river on the other side where the dark line is there, if you follow with the cursor, okay, right here. That's where the river originally was at one time, probably not all that far back. The Cheyenne is a meandering river. It moves extreme distances over the years. You'll see that in many parts of the Cheyenne River. And where it's at now, that sheer bank is, I would guess, 40 to 50 foot tall, where it's up against our road now. So in my opinion, building a berm or a wall to contain the Cheyenne is very unlikely.
Well, and you'll probably have that whole ledge drop off next anyway, because if you look with the clay that's in there, again, geologically, you're lucky that you still have that one piece in this picture that's still there to the north there, or that piece is still there on that road, because that looks like it's going to go next.
Correct.
So it seems like the best solution is you're going to have to go and take it up off that corner and up that hill. And that probably only is temporary till that water starts taking out that whole side again. So.
So we are looking into it, and hopefully we'll get them some temporary access sooner rather than later.
And you'll bring us back with the information or email us on what's going on with that. If you would, Joe, especially that is Commissioner DeSanto, if I'm correct. Is that your district?
That's my district.
Yes, sir. It'd be good for all of us to know, but just kind of where we're going and how the people are getting helped.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Roskinek.
Joe, is there a secondary means of ingress and egress? So to the north?
There is.
If they want to come in there, and on the other side, there is another means, so they're not totally landlocked.
There is. It's a 4-wheel drive only. It's talking to our foreman. Mark and I haven't, we don't know where the county jurisdiction ends and it kind of goes onto private property and goes into Hacken County up there. We didn't go to the end of it when we were doing my road tour back in December, kind of chuckled about it. We don't know where it goes and, don't really want to find out, basically.
Kind of reminds me of the 164th bridge. You could go either way and get to the bridge, but one way is pretty rough.
Yes. So if there's no more questions on that, I'll get into more of the storm event, snowstorm flooding events. Bill, I have to give him a thank you for putting a cost estimate together. Keep in mind, these are real rough estimates. And I have a printout of the sheet here if anybody wants that. Current estimates to the county as far as the highway department for gravel washing, culvert washouts and culvert replacements. We're at approximately $529,000. That's for material and installation off the state DOT bid from 2017, and he added 3% per year for inflation on that. So that's that's a rough estimate at best. Some of these we might be able to fix without. Some of them might take more. So.
Sorry, we just lost the projector. The projector just blew.
Oh.
We're gonna go 1 and 1 today.
That's okay.
So with that, we had that's the dam or the storm damage to the roadway and whatnot. As far as the snow removal and storm damage cost to clean up all the debris and stuff, we kind of put some numbers to that. Roughly about $115,000 to what it cost us that week time frame to do the snow removal on the higher elevations and the road closures and debris cleanup and what have you for the lower elevations. In a week's time, we had a total of 36 road closures over the course of a week. So our crews were very busy, going here and there, responding to calls, flooded over roadways. We had, that's closures. We had numerous spots where the water was going over the road. On the 22nd, we had, I'll just name a few here, 155 5th Avenue south of 1416, 156th Avenue, Bear Creek Road, Hammerquest Road, Paulson. Those are just to name a few of the water closures from the storm event on the 22nd. Snow closures, numerous, pretty much all hills roads, south of Nemo and, even a little bit north of Nemo kind of had a lot of snow on them, so most of them were closed. We had all of them open by 4 p.m. that day, so kudos to our crew for getting out there. We worked 4 a.m. to 6 p.m. the first day, and then by the second day, we had everything opened and the trees cut off by about 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So can't say enough about our crew and what they do out there. Then the flooding closures, I'm not even going to get into those. We had a ton of them as far as road closures. So with that, I guess I'll stand for any questions.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner DeSanto.
Hammerquest Road, which end of that road was flooded? Was it where we built the brand new bridge, or was it at the other end, east end?
I don't know for sure where exactly that was closed. Okay. I was not, I didn't get that information.
Okay, I'll go take a look at that. The other concern I have, and it's been voiced to me by a couple of residents out off of Bradsky Road where we put in that brand new bridge, they said that when they engineered that bridge, that they actually narrowed the creek at that point.
Okay.
I don't know if with fill-in or what they narrowed it with, but according to the two residents that I spoke to that have lived there for 30 plus years, even in the 72 flood, we didn't have water going over that bridge. So I'm very concerned about the engineering that took place on a brand new bridge that we just paid for that's already got water flowing over the top of it. And if it's true that it was because we narrowed the creek, which obviously would force the water up if it got deep, I'm wondering what our options are and whether or not we need to be talking to the engineer that engineered that.
Duly noted, and I will take a look at that and see what we got. I'm not sure the engineering.
Okay.
Maybe Mark can speak to that. I don't. Caught him off guard.
He was running out real quick.
I was just gonna get the heck out of here. Now I'm gonna call Mike to confirm, but typically on Bradsky Road, where the water goes over, it's about half a mile from Highway 44. There's a low spot, there. That's typically where it always goes over when we have flooding issues on Bradsky. I'm confident, but not 100% sure until I make a phone call that it did not go over at the bridge.
Okay, I've been told by two residents that it did go over the bridge.
I will check on that.
Okay, thanks, Mark.
Madam Chair.
Thanks, Mark.
Commissioner LaCroy?
Have we applied for any disaster relief on any of these, the flooding that's going on? I know we did earlier on the bridge, but on this one, I believe the governor's office has got some money coming for flooding relief. Are we in the process of applying for that? Well, I know you're gonna go out and do some more assessment on the bridges, because that's a smart thing to do after all of this. Is that going to come later?
That's, I know we've got all our stuff to Dustin. I don't know where we're at as far as in the FEMA process.
I know you guys are tag team, and I meant to say Dustin and you, but maybe Dustin can answer that when he can. Okay.
Good.
So,
Thank you. And budget-wise, we're up just with some of this about 700,000 for your budget, and you have money in your reserves for some of this,
some of it, yes.
and you'll be putting off some projects because, and we have to understand that, you guys, because of this is an event that we haven't seen for a long time with this much water. So I understand some of the engineering concerns on Bradsky and some other stuff, but guys, this is water we haven't seen for probably over 30 years, or at least 30 years. So you're going to have something going on different than you've never seen. So I understand concerns on that, but again, what I'm hearing, and I've been here 55 years, and the last time I saw this kind of water is 72. I've seen some in between, but not like this. I mean, we have water, and Dustin had said it right. We have saturation and oversaturation to the point where that water's got to go somewhere. And now, things and water we haven't seen anywhere, we're going to see it because of that oversaturation. So I'm understanding on some of these areas, but you also, sometimes you pick an area without a second access, and we've been saying this for years. We need to start thinking as a commission a little bit of safety factors when people always tell us, and geologists always tell us, just because it didn't happen for 30 years doesn't mean it's never going to happen. So we need to start thinking about those second accesses. And we had brought this up, I remember with Dustin, I had him look at some areas before with no second access. You're taking a risk for you and your family when you're doing that. And that's also a personal responsibility in one sense, but ours as well. So some of that we need to look at a little bit closer.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner DeSanto.
hence why we have 100 and 500-year flood studies. So that
Usually.
we might be something we want to pay attention to.
Yes, sir. And building in the floodway where we have cities, like one of our cities is basically built a lot in the floodway. So Rapid City did their due diligence and learned the hard way, but hopefully some of the other cities are learning that when you build in the floodway and this kind of water comes, it's a huge impact and a huge cost to everybody, including the taxpayers of every county when you have to try to fix this. So,
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Roskinick.
Joe, is there any, considering the severity of the situation, is there any federal or state funds that we would qualify for to help offset some of the costs of the county?
I haven't had a chance to look into any of that information, but it is something that I can definitely look into.
Okay.
Is there any concerns? We have some roads that are having some issues, and I don't see the water stopping anytime soon, Joe. Do we have any issues in some areas that the public and us need to be concerned about for the future that that you're seeing problematic? Meaning, if it continues to have more water, what is the solution, and what does this commission need to help you with for that solution to move forward?
We've, we've just begun to kind of look at a damage assessment, a complete damage assessment, and see some areas where we can move some things and look at that. So I can bring some information back at a later date, but I don't want to say as far as what we want to do right now.
Okay.
We're still kind of assessing the situation. Like you said, we haven't seen this water since, probably 1972 is the last time we've seen more than this. So to kind of, jump to doing stuff right now is probably not a good thing, I guess, because, do we want to, talking to, I'll just bring up our sign manager, we don't want to go buying a bunch of water over road signs or road closed signs just for
Right.
this event. So we want to make sure we sit down and do a good damage assessment and figure out if it's something that's going to keep occurring or something that's just a 30-year event or a 50-year event.
The main issues, and that's why I usually call Dustin use, is those emergency areas. If this keeps happening, instead of playing the backside of it, we always want to be ahead of it. Basically, like I said, if we keep having water, which we are, where are we moving forward? Fixing it right now is, I think, going to be on the backside as how we keeping our public and our communities safe at this point moving forward. If we've seen any, like we saw, there's some, I don't know if those are fissures or just cracks where the Cheyenne River is coming in. If we have stuff like that going on, all that's dropping. So what I'm saying is let's get ahead of that game instead of behind. I mean, sometimes you don't know, but the main thing is, and I believe you are, and thank you to your crew, which I have not thanked you and the first responders and Dustin and our sheriff department, all our first responders guys. They've been working 24/7 on these water issues, and they need a big thank you from us and their community, and the community has to listen because this is huge. This is a lot of water. And that's why we had brought this forward, Joe and Dustin. This is a lot of water, and our community has to listen at this point that this is more water than we've ever had, and they need to figure out, and we need to help figure out where those accesses are on those places that we had put people where there isn't a second access. So I'm hoping they're listening to this and figuring out for their family and themselves if this keeps happening where they're going and how we're going to help the public, because to me that's just huge, and we don't want to get behind it. We don't want any deaths because we're not ahead of this game.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner DeSanto.
I guess in short, what she's asking is that you identify potential immediate future hazards that could happen with another large storm.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure you're doing that while you're out driving around looking at the damage that's already occurred. So.
And also thank you to everyone from this commission, if I may speak for all of us, of all the first responders and the people that have been working their due diligence to make sure our public is safe. So
Absolutely.
Thank you.
thank you, Joe.
All right, I'll wrap this up hopefully quick, just a few more slides. And one of the words we're looking for in this whole thing is mitigation. So mitigation are steps that we take prior to a disaster to minimize the impacts, the threats to life, the threats to property. And mitigation takes political will, it takes social will, and it takes money. The things that we can do to improve that, we know what they are. The question is, do we have the political, social, and financial will to implement those things prior to a disaster? So very good points, very well taken. So another question, and what I tried to address here, I know it's a busy slide and I won't go through all of it, but one of the questions that we typically field is, holy smokes, I've got water in my basement. What is somebody going to do to help me with water in my basement? And then the short answer is you're a homeowner or you have a landlord, and that's part of homeownership, and you pretty much need to deal with water in your basement. People don't like to hear that, but we don't have assistance programs necessarily to help people with water in their basement. So we have incredibly saturated ground. Anybody with a below grade or a basement is going to end up with groundwater seep. I have anecdotal reports from people that tried to get sump pumps on a given Tuesday, and pretty much the shelves in all the hardware stores were bare. People just did a massive run on sump pumps. I had a sump pump that wasn't automatic and it wasn't plugged in, and I dealt with a couple inches of water in my basement as well, and now I have an automatic sump pump. But the fact of the matter is people are going to end up with water in their basement. So a couple of points here just for the commission if you get calls from your constituents. Homeowners insurance typically does not cover flooding from nature. There's, if your appliance leaks or something like that, there's usually coverage there, but typically there's not coverage from flooding by nature. You can get flood insurance through the National Flood Insurance Program. PJ's department is our flood managers for Pennington County. And then you can also get some sewer backup riders or endorsements, typically on a homeowner's policy, for a little bit extra money. But both NFIP and sewer backup policies typically have pretty significant limitations on them. They usually don't make people whole again necessarily, but they do help. This is one of those situations, and what's covered up there is prevention when possible is always the best option. Look at your crawl spaces, your basements, your window wells, and get sump pumps there early and have them running. Preventing that in the first place is always your best option. And there just isn't anybody running around pumping out people's basements for free. There are certainly down there in options for cleanup and potential assistance. Talk to your wastewater, your sanitary sewer providers. The Rapid City does have a specific policy for specific circumstances where they will offer some measure of assistance for cleanup, but that's something that you have to deal with those folks specifically. There are plenty of commercial disaster recovery and cleaning companies, some based locally, and some plumbing companies offer cleanup services for basements and sanitary sewer backups. NFIP communities, again, this is National Flood Insurance Program. It's a subsidized insurance program currently, but this is, again, the only way to get flood insurance is typically through this program. This program only covers participating communities, and the participating communities, and then the numbers in parentheses are the number of policies in those communities. So see Box Elder, Hill City, Keystone, Wonderwood. Pennington County is a county in Rapid City, and then those numbers in parentheses are how many active policies we currently have that are flood insurance policies. You're looking at a couple hundred policies and 100,000 people in Pennington County. So flood insurance, basically the only reason people have flood insurance is if you have a federally backed mortgage on a property that's within a special flood hazard area. That's what we call the 1% flood or the 100-year flood, base flood elevation. There's a lot of different names for it. But if you have a structure, if you have property in that 100-year is another typical term for that. In that flood elevation, you're required, if you have a federally backed loan, to have flood insurance. And that's typically the only people we see with these. But the interesting thing is, for me up on top of a hill with a flood policy, I get covered for some of this stuff. And because I'm way up on top of a hill, my premiums are incredibly cheap. So it's just a commercial, it's a pitch for flood insurance. Look into national flood insurance. And again, even if you're not in the flood zone or floodway or special flood hazard area, those rates are available to you, and they're affordable, and they cover you for things like this. So the other issue that commonly gets brought forth, and you've probably heard some constituents talk about this. I know I certainly have dealt with numerous folks in the community, both back in 2015 and currently on Pactola Dam releases. My property's inundated, my house is being impacted, and you're letting out more water from Pactola. What's wrong with you? And so I'm going to try to address that just a little bit here. One, with Pactola Lake, we've got a ton of management and response partners. Bureau of Reclamation, Forest Service, Corps of Engineers, Game Fish and Parks, Sheriff's Office, Rapid City Water Department, and then our responders. And yes, we do have a thunderstorm moving over us. Lots of different management pieces that come into here. And the reason that's important is this is a really good a graphic that talk about reservoir allocations. So you can see on this graphic here that there's area way down at the bottom that we can't let out. It's that dead zone or dead pool. And then that basically that active conservation pool is where we normally like to see Pactola. Everything's good there, recreation's good there, water supply, drinking water, agriculture, everything is happy when we're in the active conservation pool. And that's what everybody works really, 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 really hard to keep Pactola in, is that active conservation pool. Once we go above that active conservation pool and get into the flood control pool, automatic things start happening. And I'll follow that up on this next slide here. You can see as of today, at 7 o'clock this morning, our pool elevation for Pactola was just over 4,588 feet. I put that little dotted line there to kind of give you a visual graphic on where that is probably at. And we're releasing about 465 cubic feet per second. The record at Pactola we set in 2015, and you can see there we're within a foot of the record that we set in 2015. In 2015, our releases topped out at about 514 cubic feet per second. So we're a little lower on our releases right now, but man, we're coming up close on setting a record of pool elevation at Pactola. This is why. Here's a graphic of inflows versus outflows. That first slide there, that big black peak is inflows. Luckily, we can see those inflows are dropping currently, and then you can see that red line are the outflows. That's where we crank up the release and try to keep that elevation as low as we can. And then that second graphic just shows you basically what the surface of Pactola has done from May into June. And you can see that rapid climb, we're filling Pactola up is basically what that means. So this is why we're seeing what we're seeing in Pactola. So once we get into that flood control pool, when we're down in that conservation pool, everybody's working together, determining what the releases need to be for downstream water rights holders, making sure all of that is good, and our dam tender up there is following the policy and talking with folks on what those releases are. Once we get into that flood pool, once we bump up into that flood pool, and right now we're 8 feet plus into that flood pool, there is an emergency release schedule for Pactola Dam that reverts to authority of the Army Corps of Engineers. And when you have these elevations and these inflows, these are what your outflows are. Yes, there's some dialogue and there's some predictive stuff of how much water do we expect to come into that system, what kind of inflows do we expect into Pactola, what are we releasing from Deerfield. All of those are inputs. But what people need to remember downstream, particularly through Johnson Siding, is the fact that at this point, Army Corps of Engineers, their primary objective is to prevent catastrophic, uncontrolled releases from dam failures. So this is the Teton Dam in Idaho, 1976, about 100 feet taller than Pactola, but we don't want a failure either on our dam, obviously, or the Army Corps of Engineers is managing the Missouri River Basin. So they're looking at all these inputs into the Missouri River system, not just the Cheyenne, not just Rapid Creek, not just Castle Creek. Army Corps of Engineers looks at a very, very, very big picture, all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico, and this emergency release schedule is based on that big picture. So again, it's not something any member of the public wants to hear, but the answer is your front yard in Johnson Siding doesn't rank very high on the Army Corps of Engineers priority list for catastrophic dam failure and managing the entire Missouri River Basin.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner
quick
DeSantis.
question, Dustin. How close are we, if you know, and you probably do, as far as Oahe overflow is concerned? It sounded like a couple of weeks ago we were already close.
It's full. All of this dam, I mean, Gavin's Point, Garris, all of this entire system, if you looked at that national coverage of map, rainfall, there's no place that's not full.
And have we experienced the melt off from Montana and that area yet?
I don't know. I honestly don't know.
All right.
Sandbag requests. We're getting towards the end here, I promise. This is another typical request. Hey, what's the county doing for sandbags? What's the city doing for sandbags? There was actually a decision made by the elected officials several decades ago after some research that basically said we're not going to be in the sandbag business. And there's some really valid reasons for that. The flooding that we typically see here is flash flooding. It's usually measured in minutes and hours, maybe a day. We typically don't see regular flooding or, these crests, these slow rise and inundation type flooding. That's not our norm. Now with our ground saturation and what we're seeing now, we're seeing things that aren't in recent memory. But most, kind of like Joe was saying about running out and buying a bunch of road closure signs or flooding signs, this is not the type of flooding that we normally see. And just some sandbag logistics, and this is a picture from Yankton. This is a Yankton setup where they have traffic cones and people with shovels and a big pile of dirt and a ladder, and they're trying to fill sandbags one by one. If you just think about all those different pieces of this, acquisition of sandbags, where you stockpile and store them, how you're going to distribute them, setting up the fill stations, getting the fill material. Once you fill those sandbags, they're heavy. How do you move them around? How do you get them to where they need to be? Deploying them, who's building those sandbag structures? How many sandbag structures does it take? How are you prioritizing where you're building sandbag structures? And then once you've deployed them, how do you clean them up? How do you pick them up? Once a sandbag's been inundated with water, they're now contaminated. So how do you deal with sandbags that have been wet and are now dry dry and you have thousands of sandbags that you distributed through the community and now you have to pick up. So as you can see, it's a very complex, very labor-intensive operation to look at sandbagging. Not opposed to it, but there would certainly be some incredible discussions and resource allocations that would need to happen if we wanted to get back into the sandbag business. And I think that's probably a discussion for later if there's again, the political will to look at that. There is some limited availability of sandbags in local hardware stores. If people want to get a few sandbags to protect their window wells, they can do that locally through local vendors, local merchants. So that capability is there. So where are we at? Still have saturated ground. We still have overfull reservoirs. As you can hear, we still have thunderstorms. I like to call our area a hydrological shooting gallery. Wherever that thunderstorm drops water, we see flooding. If it drops it all in one drainage, that drainage is going to have problems. If it drops it over several drainages, then we tend to weather that storm a little bit better. We have significantly damaged or impacted transportation and wastewater infrastructure. So to answer Commissioner LaCroix's question, the state is considering a second incident period for a potential federal declaration, disaster declaration. So the preliminary damage assessment was due yesterday. I submitted that to the state yesterday, including what County Highway heroically was able to get to us, thanks to Bill and several other, I mean, everybody pitched into that one. But for right now at the county level, from the preliminary damage assessment, again, road districts, sanitary districts, our municipalities, everybody, the shoot from the hip estimate right now is about $725,000. Our per capita threshold for the county for declaring a disaster in this process, this federally declared disaster process, is at $381,000. So we far exceed our per capita. So the next thing you'll see from EM at an upcoming meeting will probably be a request for a county level disaster declaration, and that will move this process forward. So you will see that coming. And then finally, here's our 3-month long-range prediction from the Weather Service. I give my folks at Weather Service a hard time because every time you ask them what the weather's going to do, they always say equal chances for and against average conditions. And so I always give them a hard time about that. They're not saying that now. Right now we have pretty solid numbers that say we are going to be wetter and colder over the next 3 months. So like Deb was alluding to, I'm sorry, Commissioner Hadcock was alerting to, the rain's not done. And we're looking at wetter and colder temperatures over the next 3 months. Happy to stand for any questions. I'm sorry that was so long.
Commissioner LaCroix.
Dustin, thank you for your report. You know, you heard a lot of questions here today about some of the damages that are happening right now and how things could probably be better. Are we going to do some things differently? I like to believe Rapid City is a learning, or Pennington County is a learning community. I mean, went through the 72 floods, a lot of things happened. I mean, we did the Greenway. We got a group of people to help clean that away. These flows have been really high in the past, before too. But some of the things that this community has done has helped eliminate or reduce some of the stuff, that damage that could have happened if we hadn't done it. I mean, Kenny Lake Dam has just been replaced and redone, I believe, about 3 years ago, and some other stuff. So I just wanted to give kudos for our community that we have done some things forward, and it could have been worse if we hadn't done some of the litigation earlier.
You're absolutely
if we
correct.
haven't learned. I mean, even with the floodplain committee that was reevaluated back in 2006, you know, they raised the level up 12 inches, I believe. So, I mean, to build in there and reducing the building in them. So I just wanted to concentrate on that. We have done some good things, and things are working, and all the gauges are working.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. No, we've done things that other communities have not. We are held up as an example of communities that are doing things right. There's always more that can be done. And then the other thing to keep in mind there, no matter how much time, effort, energy, and passion we put into mitigation, no matter how good we are, and it's another thing nobody, especially elected officials or response professionals, want to hear, is oftentimes Mother Nature always wins. Yep.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Roskinek, please.
Dustin, can we get an update on what's going on? We got Sheridan Lake, which is a recreational lake, and they have no control on the amount of water that goes over that. It just, what goes over, what comes in, goes over. And then Deerfield is a reservoir that feeds the Pactola. Are they controlling the water output of Deerfield? Or
Yes, so
what's,
Deerfield, I didn't want to, it was a long enough presentation to begin with. I apologize for not including that. But all that same allocation table and rate release schedule and all those same conversations that go into releasing water from Pactola, all those same discussions happen simultaneously with Deerfield because that's the same system. So they're managing the releases in the water in Deerfield as all the way downstream, including how it impacts Pactola. So they're managed as a system, not independently. They're looked at holistically.
any concerns below Sharon Lake Dam and
So we saw
Reptile
that,
Gardens?
ultimately Spring Creek, that what we saw through Spring Creek and the Hart Ranch Golf Course and the Hart Ranch community down there, it's because we have a lot of water. But again, we can't control, there's no flood control in that dam. Anything coming into that dam goes over the spillway at some point, so.
Thank you.
Commissioner LaCroy, please.
Sorry, I just got one thought because it came to my mind. I've had great conversations with Don Barnett, who was here during the flood. And, one of the biggest things that he said during that flood was the lack of communication, not being able to communicate because back then we had landlines and the radio stations were down and so forth. But I think, Dustin, I think you guys are doing an excellent job of getting the communication out. That's not our problem now. Now our problem is convincing the public not to cross the roads when it's flooding.
Sir.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner DeSanto.
I think one important thing also to point out to the public as far as the dams are concerned and the amount of water that's coming out of the dams and the Corps of Engineers, that's not all the water that's going into that creek. There's a tremendous amount of watershed between Pactola Dam and Rapid City that people don't take into consideration. Every single one of those hills that ends up in the valley where the Rapid Creek is shedding water into that watershed, so.
The greatest example of that, Commissioner, is the 1972 flood. Pactola Dam was in place in 1972, and the water that caused that 72 flood along the Rapid Creek drainage, that water landed between Rapid City and
Right.
Pactola.
That's right. Yeah. So
Thank
we
you.
can't blame it all on the dams.
Any other questions,
Glad the
commissioners?
dam's there.
Not. Thank you,
Thanks for your time.
Dustin.
Good job, Dustin. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you, Joe. Next, we have the Forests of the Black Hills from 1874 to 1908 presentation, Mr. Bill Colburn. This is one of those 5-minuters, right?
It's very interesting. I'm glad I came down for that. That was really good. You guys got some great people in charge and very informational. I'll try to run through this really quickly. It's not made to do that, but I will try to do that. I'm Bill Coburn. I'm forester. I just recently retired from the Nyman Timber Company back in June of 2018. I worked for Pope and Talbot for 27 years, Nyman's for 10 years. Grew up in Deadwood. My family goes all the way back to 1876 in Deadwood, so born and raised, and was able to practice forestry in the Black Hills all my life. And I also, part of it is just trying to help get people educated about what happened in the past and how it can help us learn some lessons to go forward. So my program is the Forest of the Black Hills, 1874, 1908. This picture is of the Custer expedition. You can see the types of forests that were shown as part of the Ellingsworth collection. There's a picture of the cavalry, and this is Ellingsworth photo lab there. And I'll run through this really quickly because of the time, but what I did is I focused in on what the expedition talked about forests, and one of the quotes was, "None of us ever saw so dense and extended growth of pine." And this is pretty interesting. The trees have been thrown down by fire and tempest, often half consumed. And obviously there was a lot of fires and a lot of types of disturbances that occurred before the Custer expedition came through. And you can see remnants of old fires right here. You can still see some snags right here. And if you look at the new photos, those snags are still there.
Mr. Bill?
Yes.
You just do your presentation. You're fine because it's very interesting. So
Oh, okay.
you just do it.
All right,
Do it.
all right.
Lloyd brought you here for a reason, and he thinks this is, for us, a commission and a public,
All right.
to know these things, sir. So I was just teasing you, so I apologize.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
But the other part of this whole thing was that the Custer expedition was the start of what the interest of the U.S. government, after they discovered gold and there was a lot of, trespassing going on, the Jenny expedition was organized. And that was organized by Grant specifically to come in and look at the Black Hills to figure out what the value of the Black Hills was so that possibly they could buy the Black Hills from the Native Americans or a whole bunch of other things that were going on in the background. The cavalry, there's a contingent of about 400 cavalry that came in with this expedition. It was organized by Richard Dodge, and it had botanists, biologists, geologists, cartographers, and it was the map and inventory of the Black Hills. It was all men except for a stowaway named Calamity Jane. So she did move around a lot. Again, some of the quotes that came out of this Jenny expedition were very interesting. Throughout the hills, the number of trees which bear the marks of thunderbolts is very remarkable. The woods are frequently set on fire and vast damage done. Many broad belts of country now charred, dead, and useless. The very large mass of these pine forests, dark and rich and beautiful as they are yet composed of trees, the very large majority of which less than 8 inches diameter. Now, we measure 8-inch diameter at DBH, which is 4.5 feet. At that point in time, 8 inches in diameter was measured at basically at ground level. These are small trees. And they're seeing lots of small trees as part of this Jenny. This is a little bit different view than what the pictures of Custer's expedition shows us. So there is a mix of different size classes and age classes in the Black Hills that existed, and it just wasn't large areas of big pine scattered throughout the hills. There's scarcely to be found in the Black Hills a forest of old trees. Large, fine saw logs to be found in various considerable numbers, but rarely in large bodies. There was an immense plateau in the West Mesa, very densely covered with thickets of pine, very small, averaging scarcely 6 inches in diameter. Now, that's the area we generally call the limestone plateau, which is basically Spearfish Canyon west all the way down into the Beaver Creek country, Mallow Camp, and that whole area, which is basically a limestone plateau. Well, when gold was discovered, there was a mass influx of people and miners and everything, and we're pretty familiar about what went on there, but it brought people and basically a lot of exploitation of the resources in the Black Hills, and a lot of trees were cut, and mainly for the mining end of it, building the mines, also for homes, etc. And right after the gold was discovered, there was a sawmill that sprung up in 1876 in February called the Murphy Sawmill. Late in 1875, gold was discovered in Deadwood, and between in the winter of 75, 76, and the spring of 76, a mass exodus of people going into Deadwood, and there was a big rush to cut trees and to make lumber. And this number right here, 150,000 board feet, or $150 per thousand for sluice boxes. Was very high. I mean, if you look at that, what that would be in today's terms, it would be very expensive. There were 3 sawmills by July that were cutting about 20,000 feet each day, and they couldn't make the demand. Whip saws, this is kind of an interesting type of operation. That's a whipsaw. If you can look at, they had one guy in the pit, one guy on top of the log, and they're pulling that saw through that log. I would hate to have been the guy on the bottom, but that's how they made lumber. before they had a sawmill.
Those guys probably wouldn't win an arm wrestling contest.
No.
against anybody.
This is interesting. I've always wondered what this was, but if you look at this, this is probably what a whipsaw pit was in Deadwood, right in the main tree of Deadwood. You guys have probably seen that picture in the past, and but you can see the logs, and you can see there's 2 logs across there, and that's probably, these aren't much for logs, but.
We just thought it was a drainage.
What's that?
We just thought it was a drainage.
Yeah.
So the road was
It used to be where there was a tunnel. But what was happening in the Black Hills was really a result of a lot of early legislation, federal legislation that encouraged not only exploitation of the Black Hills, but of the West. You have the General Mining Act, the Timber Culture Act. You have the Act of General Grant transferring the ownership of Black Hills to the U.S., 1877. You had the Free Timber and Stone Act, and each one of those was to try to disperse these unclaimed lands to private parties. It was basically to move this nation forward in some respects so that we could privatize everything and make money off it. In the late 1800s, as in a lot of the West, there was large areas that were basically cut over. The Black Hills had a lot of wood that was cut. In some cases, some people figured about 1.5 billion board feet cut between 1875 and 1897. That is a lot of wood. Especially when you consider the Black Hills didn't have as many trees then as we have now. There were, by 1897, there were 42 portable sawmills operating in the Black Hills. This is a picture of the train that went into the Homestake mine. You got to remember, at this point in time, all the smelters in the Black Hills were being heated and operated using wood. There wasn't any coal or anything coming into the Black Hills until the late 1890s. And so it took a tremendous amount. There were 8 of these trains a day, 9 cars, 5 loads per car. If you figure that out, it's about 365 cords of wood every day for most of all the years. That was just for the Homestake mine. You can see that right here. That's a cordwood dump. That's all wood right there, and that's the old smelter right there near the open cut. This is a picture of the Black Hills Fort Pierre Railroad that eventually went down into through Stage Barn into Rapid, but it was in the late 1890s before that occurred. Pictures of the lead. You can see not much for trees. This is an area close to Deadwood, placer mining. Not much for trees left, and a lot of destruction. This is a picture of the Durst sawmill near Hill City. There's some of the stopes in the Homestake mine. You can see the amount of wood that was being used just for the infrastructure. This is an interesting picture. This is a picture of Gayville. You guys know where Gayville is? If you go out of Deadwood on the way, you go up to Leeds, Central City. Right there, as you turn the corner, close to where the old processing pit where you go into Maitland, that was Gayville. This was one of the first areas that actually had a placer mine. But this is really close to where the initial discovery of gold in Deadwood was, too. But you can see what Gayville looked like back in the 1870s. Deadwood here, this is an 1880s picture, but interesting, you can start to see the initial stocking of the trees that probably right now are the forest of Deadwood. This all dark area, these are young trees, probably anywhere from 5 to 10 feet tall. And you can see them here, you can see them here, and all through here you can see really a lot of small trees. Picture of lead. There's another picture of lead. Again, you can see these light tinges of darkness. That's all small trees coming in. So 1891, there was a Forest Reserve Act that was passed called the General Revision Act. That was passed to try to protect some of the more special places in the West. About 13 million acres was included in this. And it later became really the Forest Reserve or the General Reserve Act or General Revision Act. The Black Hills was not part of this initial designation in 1891. It authorized the president to set aside timber reserves, national parklands. Yellowstone had already been reserved at this point in time, but this actually, in 1891 reservation did include parts of the Grand Canyon and areas where Jackson Hole is as part of that reserve. One thing I was going to say that this was a significant change in the attitude of the U.S. government at this point in time, where up till 1891, everything was, let's get rid of it. There was no need for public lands. We don't need to save anything. Just give it away or get people to claim it. So this 13 million acres actually became the foundation of our national parks, our national forests, and all the public lands we have in the United States. So it was a huge change in 1891. One of the interesting parts of this is Richard Pettigrew, who was the first U.S. Senator from South Dakota. He helped write the General Revision Act in 1891. And it's kind of interesting because he and his brother helped survey and settle Sioux Falls. That's where he made his money. And if you ever get to Sioux Falls, there's some interesting history between the Pettigrew family. But so there was some South Dakota fingerprints on the General Revision Act. So between 1891 and going forward, there was still a lot of concern about what was happening in the West. In 1896, the National Forestry Commission was organized under the National Academy of Science to investigate what was going on, what's happening, and what can we do about it. So they put together this National Forestry Commission. John Muir was part of this, and he's the one that helped, basically reserve Yosemite National Park, and he was the organizer of the Sierra Club initially. So they actually, John Muir and that commission actually came into the Black Hills, took a train in, and then a carriage to Sylvan Lake and stayed at Sylvan Lake, and they viewed the damage that was going on in the Black Hills. They were here specifically to put a recommendation to Grover Cleveland to try to save more acres. And there was they were looking at about 21 million more acres of forest reserves. At the same time, this gentleman, Gifford Pinchot, he is a consultant under the Bureau of Forestry to the National Forestry Commission. And you got to remember, at this point in time, there's no U.S. Forest Service or nothing. There is a Bureau of Forestry with just a few foresters working underneath this. And but he sends a gentleman named Henry Graves, who later became the second chief of the U.S. Forest Service, to come in and evaluate the Black Hills through the Bureau of Forestry's eyes. And it took several months, and he also inspected the Black Hills on the back of a horse. He actually said that the Black Hills urgently needed the protection against fires and wasteful methods of lumbering and timber fraud. And again, these observations that Graves gives us is another indication that the forests that we see in the Custer photos truly did not show the entire picture of what the Black Hills look like. In places, the second growth is very dense with as many as 150 to 200 trees per acre. By second growth, he's talking about thrifty growing trees, not large enough for lumber, 10 to 14 inches on the stump, about 100 years old. Not only is there a large amount of young growth scattered throughout the original forest, but there is a great belt in the northern hills composed almost entirely of second growth timber. This belt extends from Bear Butte Canyon, which is Van Auker area, west to Spearfish, then south through the limestone to the headwaters of Gillette Canyons and Hell Canyons. It's exactly what they had discovered in the Jenny Gulch or Jenny expedition. So this kind of confirms what was seen. These areas did not have any mineralogy, and there wasn't any civilization in those areas. And so these areas didn't suffer any of the deforestation that you saw on the east side and the south end of the Black Hills. This is a picture that Graves drew. And all this green area is basically either heavily stocked second growth or lightly stocked second growth. All the brown areas here are areas that have been cut over. And you can see that west or the east side of the Black Hills has been heavily cut over. So a very, very interesting map that he put together on the back of a horse. Graves' report on insect damage. This is kind of another sidelight about what was going on, but he said on the high limestone ridge near Crook's Tower, they had a little Spearfish Creek. There are numerous patches of dead and dying trees. These patches are rectangular in shape, and they follow the tops of the ridges. I kind of mapped this right here. That's about 3,000 acres. And you keep an eye on where that is because that, again, kind of tells you the story of mountain pine beetle, the first recorded history of mountain pine beetle. In 1897, Cleveland designates 20 million acres, which include the Black Hills. And this creates a huge, huge controversy. It didn't allow, because it's under the South or the Department of Interior, there wasn't anything for allowing for management. It was just putting it on the shelf and you can't touch it. So it immediately withdrew the mining, grazing, and logging on all these acres. Now, not that was going to be followed or there wasn't any enforcement, but the federal government saying you can't be there. Custer Chronicle stated the executive order may be safely regarded as one of the most vital blows of civilization so far as the Black Hills are concerned that has ever been perpetrated by any ruler of any nation in the history of modern or ancient times. I think they're mad. Deadwood Pioneer Times merely portrayed it as saying it means, briefly interpreted and summed up, a death blow to our country. Pettigrew and Moody, who now is working for Homestake, he was the other senator for the state of South Dakota. They organize that this isn't good. You know, we got to do something about this Forest Reserve Act. Pettigrew helped get it passed in 1891, but it didn't affect the Black Hills at that time. So they started working with some other senators from the West and also with Homestake. They had an idea that they might be able to change the wording or introduce legislation that would help allow management of these reserves going forward. So this gentleman, I think, is kind of an unknown hero because he helped actually set the tone for the USGS Lands Bureau to set the stage to sell timber off of the forest reserves. He works with Pettigrew and Pinchot, and they help write what's called the Organic Act or the Forest Management Act, which actually set up the national forest systems, and it set up the background or the reason why we were going to manage these national forests. So in 1897, the Forest Reserve Act, or the Organic Act, was passed. It established the purpose for the forest reserves to improve, protect the forests, secure favorable water flow, furnish a continuous supply of timber for the U.S. citizens. And the Secretary of Interior is given the power to protect, administer, and sell timber. This is huge, huge part for the Black Hills. Using this, Pinchot goes and talks to Homestake, and they get Homestake to agree to buy timber off the Black Hills Forest Reserve. This became the first timber sale ever sold off any federal lands in the United States. Pinchot basically says there's no other forest reserve in the United States in which practical forestry is more urgently needed, or in which results in such importance may be more easily achieved. Being a forester, Pinchot's kind of the godfather of forestry in the United States, and it's really interesting that he spent so much time and had so much influence over the Black Hills. He helped get this case set up. Homestake bought it in 1898 after 18 months of trying to work out all the details. This is case number 1 is right here, Steamboat Rock. If you guys know where that is, that's where Steamboat Rock is. Estes Creek goes right up through here. And then they had case number 2, 3, 4, and 5. But this whole area was the foundation of the forest, the first initial timber sales in the Black Hills. This is an aerial photo. It's called a infrared, and you can see the dark areas. This is really heavily stocked timber still. And in some cases, the case number 1 has been entered 4 times since 1897, and there's still a lot of trees growing. This was taken in 2016, and this is mainly after the mountain pine beetle had actually done a lot of damage. So first U.S. Forest Service timber sale, it produced about $15,000 on 15 million board feet, about $1 a thousand. Took them 8 years. There's a lot of transition. Initially, the Department of Interior didn't have any foresters at all. It was not a lot of guidance. They said leave 2 trees per acre greater than 8 inches. There wasn't much being left. Pinchot again came back to the Black Hills, provided guidance, and gradually his influence and his foresters came through to really make case number 1 very successful over those 8 years. But initially, even case 1 wasn't this great example of forestry. They weren't leaving very much. They were leaving more than what was being left before, but not much more than that. 2 8-inch trees over 1 acre isn't a lot. In 1924, the U.S. Forest Service calculated that the average volume per acre was 2,600 board feet, as compared to 500 board feet at the time at the end of the harvest. So basically, it had increased by 500% over those 16 years. This is a map. You can see Estes Creek right here. This is a case 1 map that was hand-drawn. Kind of cool. It's a picture of case 1 at the end. You can see they used everything. All the fuel wood, except for the branches where they piled and burned it, but they were using just about everything because, again, at this point in time, the wood was quite valuable for even fuel. There was an infestation of mountain pine beetle starting. This is an interesting quote here. The second forest supervisor, but the first forest supervisor that lived on the Black Hills was Seth Bullock, which is interesting. He was a man of many talents. He succeeded Henry Haymaker, who was basically a political hack that had been appointed, who lived in Sheridan, Wyoming, and he was the supervisor over a whole bunch of other reserves. Seth was a very good friend of Teddy Roosevelt. You guys probably all know that. And you can imagine why Seth got the appointment because of all that involvement. So, but he became a really good, he wasn't trained in forestry, but he knew how to handle people and knew how to get things done. But one of the things that was really interesting is this quote he complaining to Roosevelt. He says, he complains directly to Roosevelt that Washington keeps sending him dandies when he needs men who can sleep out in the open with or without a blanket, put out a fire, and catch a horse thief. That's what he was worried about. Working with Gifford Pinchot Bullock's 4.5 years, 10 years superintendent, established the precedents that would allow the Black Hills Forest to flourish. So I thought that was some pretty cool things that were occurring early on. Now, Pinchot, again, spending the time in 1901, he came back to the Black Hills, and he brought with him another one of the future Forest Service chiefs, Henry Griffith, and then also Andrew Hopkins, who was the chief entomologist for the Forest Service. They went in and looked at some of the forests, and we went back up to where Graves was talking about the mountain pine beetle. And they observed what they call vast numbers of rock pine, ponderosa pine, that were dying or had died in recent years. The dying occurs in clumps of to many hundreds. In some sections, it's viewed from the summit of Cement Ridge and other favorable points. And it covered large areas. Mr. Griffith said that he figured that covered about 116,000 acres and affected about 225 million board feet. I kind of, based on his definition, I outlined about 116,000 acres from what his description was.
So Bill, do you know at this last beetle infestation, how many infested areas, how many acres it was, and then the Board of
At this point in time, Griffith
Board of
is
Feet?
estimating 116,000. This is in 1901.
How about now? The one that last one, you already have
We'll
that
get
in
to
here?
that here
Sorry, I didn't
quick.
read forward.
But this is the first mountain pine beetle infestation of any record anywhere. And again, Hopkins is there, and they don't even know what it is at this point in time. Hopkins is a self-trained entomologist, and he basically says it's a small black boring beetle belonging to a species heretofore unknown to science and appears peculiar to the Black Hills. Since it has not been designated by local name, I would suggest hereafter it to be designated as a pine-destroying beetle of the Black Hills. And this is what's kind of cool. Dendrocnus ponderosae Hopkins. He gets the name after himself. This is called the Black Hills beetle at this point in time, and not the mountain pine beetle.
Does he have infestation problems as well? Does this man have infestation?
We won't go there.
I'm just teasing you.
Dr. Hopkins, in his preliminary report submitted to the Forest Service, gave the following advice, and this is still pretty good advice even to this day. Locate the patches of newly infested trees, mark for cutting all these, cut these trees or remove the bark from the infested portion before the 1st of May. Sounds pretty good, doesn't it? The Division of Forestry attempted to carry this out, but there were some laws that forbade cutting of any green infested trees, believe it or not. It was on the law, and they could only cut the trees if it turned red. Well, if it turns red, the bugs are gone. So, I mean, even at that point in time, they had some problems carrying on some of these things. They did have sawmills going on, but the amount of mountain pine beetle that was dying in the areas where it was occurring, there weren't a lot of sawmills, and they couldn't process a lot of the trees. And at about this same time, Pinchot and Roosevelt, they had an interesting relationship. You can see the differences in sizes. They both liked the box. And every Thursday night in the basement of the White House, Pinchot would come over and he and Teddy would box. And it's another really interesting story about their relationships. And then it's just a picture of some Forest Service guys hammer branding all the logs. Each log had to be hammer branded, U.S. Forest Service. But the Pinchot and Roosevelt actually, because Pinchot for a long time had been wanting the forest reserves pulled out of the Department of Interior, which was mainly for exploitation. That was what the basis of the Department of Interior, and put it in the Department of Ag, which is basically to manage the resources. Finally, Roosevelt and Pinchot were able to do that in 1906. The forest reserves became the national forests. And the Black Hills National Forest, that's when it was basically originated and named. The forest supervisor's office at that point in time was Deadwood at the time. And where Bullock was the forest supervisor, it was the old Masonic Temple. So, but during the epidemic, Bullock and Hopkins worked out a deal where they were hiring unemployed miners, cowboys, and others, and paying them 25 cents a tree to go out and cut these infested trees and debark them. And my understanding, there were hundreds of thousands of dollars spent back in the early 1900s doing this. And I don't know what the impacts are. I'm guessing locally they probably had some great impacts, but there was a lot of money spent trying to get a handle on the mountain pine beetle, even at that point in time. So by 1908, this mountain pine beetle epidemic had taken about anywhere from 1/2 to 1/3 of the Black Hills. And they figured somewhere about 1 billion board feet had been killed. Now you add the 1 billion board feet that was estimated to be killed by mountain pine beetle, add that to the 1.5 billion board feet that had been cut by the miners and everybody else. My thoughts that this forest didn't look very good in early 1900s. It probably was pretty sparsely populated with trees. So everything we see now is pretty much started in the early 1900s going forward. Prior to 1901, the serious nature of the attacks was not recognized and no record occurred in any effort to control it. Later, with attacks of the same beetle in Colorado, showed intelligent expenditure of comparatively small amounts of money in 1897-98 would have checked the attack and saved millions of dollars worth of timber. I could pretty much repeat that today.
Bill,
And, we sometimes fail to learn from history.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Ross, or DeSanto,
25
please.
cents a tree. How long would it take a man to cut down a tree and strip the bark off of it? Maybe
My
an
guess
hour?
is, well, you got to remember, these aren't chainsaws. These is crosscut saw.
Right.
And you need 2 people with a crosscut saw. I mean, it had to take a lot, but there were a lot of broke miners at that point in time. There were a lot of people that didn't have any jobs. And Hopkins at this point in time, I would like to take some time and go back and actually dig into a lot of his stuff, because he basically camped in the Black Hills for almost 6 years trying to get this handle on this infestation. He was sending letter after letter, telegraph after telegraph to Washington, hammering them for more money, more money, more money. And they kept sending it to him because they wanted to shut him up, is my understanding. And so my gut feeling is it had an impact. I don't think it was down to rattle.
Squeaky wheel gets the grease. Huh?
Yeah. So he wrote this pretty interesting. There's no trace of doubt in my mind that if my recommendation 1901, 1902 had been promptly adopted and carried out, there would have been no further loss of timber from the work of the beetles. The Forest Service should certainly profit by this. This is a guy that's writing in 1910 after he retired. The use of the national forest, this is put together by Pinchot, and I fortunately have a copy of one of these. It's pretty cool. And in closing, we'll just talk a little bit about Pinchot and his changes, what he sees, not only in the Black Hills, but the forest over the larger area. In 1898, he says that people knew little or cared less about forestry. For much of his time as chief of the Forest Service, and he was chief, he started as Bureau Forestry Chief in 1897, and then he actually was fired in 1910 when he came into disagreement with, I think it was, I can't even think of the president's name that succeeded Roosevelt. But he was talking about the virtues of the national forest all the time. And by 1905, he said there was some change in the public, that a good share of the people in the forest, or in the good share of the forest and the life of the nation was almost everywhere recognized. And this is pretty interesting quote. What is past is prologue. The forests are there today, promising for all times a continuous supply of timber. So that's the end of my presentation. Sorry to try, I was rushing a little bit, but I do appreciate your time and some of the resources, and that's who I am. And are there any questions?
We can tell you don't have any passion for the Forest Service.
Yeah, I basically live and die. My wife keeps telling me get a life, and this is my life.
I think it's pretty awesome.
Not a bad life.
Mr. Guffey, do you have anything to share?
Well, I guess just on your question,
Come on up, sir. And your name and what you do for Pennington County, Mr. Guffey.
Scott Guffey, Pennington County Natural Resource Director. I guess to your question on this last pine beetle epidemic, about 450,000 acres, and impacted, I don't know how many board feet.
You know, I did some, I've got another, well, I'll refer to I have a mountain pine beetle presentation that I just put together dealing with the history of mountain pine beetle all the way through from this infestation all the way through the end. Use some of the stuff that Scott's put together, some of it stuff that I put together and collected. I can come back sometime, we can talk about it, but my gut feeling is at the end, there was somewhere close to about 14 million trees that died during this last infestation, compared to about 11 billion, million trees that were cut or died on the original infestation. I think the last infestation we had was bigger than the 1908 one.
Nice.
My gut feeling.
Commissioners, any questions?
Madam Chair.
Commissioner LaCroix.
Thanks, Bill, for coming. I mean, the history that you shared is amazing. You did rush a little bit because I liked hearing a lot more of your stories about Deadwood and so forth. But, your original presentation that I was seeing, you're so neutral on the history of the Black Hills. You talk about the facts of it. And it wasn't always pretty, as some of the expeditions show. If you look at some of those pictures of Deadwood and Lead area, how desolate those were, and you can kind of imagine that now when you drive up there after the fire. I mean, and there was a lot of that back in the 1870s when they come in. So proper management and how it got to that way and the way you presented, I really enjoyed and appreciate your work.
Well, thank you. I think, like I said, there's the old quote: if you don't reserve or you don't learn from history, you're bound to repeat it. And
Amen.
There's a lot of history that we keep repeating it, and hopefully going forward, we've learned some things. I know with Scott's leadership now with this Black Hills Forest Resiliency Group, I think there's a good chance that we can help at least minimize some of the mistakes that we made in the past, and having the Pennington County involved in this thing is huge. You guys have the largest percentage of the national forests of any county in the Black Hills, and you know, leadership and having Scott here as one of the leaders is great. And you know, the Forest Service is going into their planning process for the next forest plan revision, which, you know, that took 15 years to do a 10-year revision the last time. And they're started collecting it, and they have, you know, a bit more people involved in that to help guide the Forest Service is extremely important, because I can tell you, they don't have all the answers, and they make mistakes just like we do, and they need the public's input to make sure we do the right thing.
Any other questions?
Madam
Oh,
Chair.
great job, Bill.
Commissioner Roskinek, please.
Bill, I might ask you a question. We would, 5 years ago, we'd probably get between 15 and 30 trees that would be, the state would mark on our property. And, you know, I'd look for the sawdust and the sap. And then evidently, there's another beetle besides the bark beetle that only goes up about 4 feet up on Ponderosa. And those don't,
That's turpentine beetle, Ponderosa valens. Yeah, they generally won't kill trees. They get attracted. Where you see a lot of it is people cut firewood and they put the firewood right up next to the trees, and then the valens comes in and attacks it, and they got great big pitch pockets on them, and they're about a third bigger than mountain pine beetle. So they create quite a bit of pitch when they attack the trees, but they don't have the blue stain fungus as part of their, which is what really helps kill the tree. And so it's interesting, because the mountain pine beetle actually has nodules in the back of its head that carries that mountain or that blue stain fungus with them. And one of the first things they do is they infect the tree with that blue stain, which helps kill the tree. And then also, as that fungus develops, it develops sugars, which then the larvae eat as they trying to get big enough to become an adult. They eat that sugars that's produced by the fungus. So it's kind of a, you know, symbiotic relationship through there. And
I think it's ironic that the forester can, when they mark those trees, they can differentiate between, you know, the ones that will kill the tree and the
we're a
ones.
smart lot.
Good presentation, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you
I was
very
just
much.
wondering if you guys called each other to make sure you wore green
Yeah, we
shirts for
coordinated.
forestry today.
Madam Chair,
Really accident.
I'm kidding.
Madam Chair.
Yeah.
Commissioner DeSanto.
I do have one unrelated question for Scott. It's related to the amount of water we got sitting and standing everywhere. And how's this going to affect us as far as infestation of insects this upcoming summer?
Obviously, we're gonna probably have a lot of mosquitoes. The good thing is it's gonna be the floodwater mosquito, the Aedes vexum, which isn't normally a West Nile carrier. The Culex tarsalis, which is the West Nile carrying mosquito, that thrives on drought conditions, so probably gonna have a lot of nuisance mosquitoes out there, but hopefully not a lot of West Nile cases.
How about
Don't quote me on
ticks?
that, but that's generally the case. When you got a lot of water, you'll get
Big
a lot of
increase
mosquitoes.
in ticks too?
There's a lot of ticks. Ticks are out already, so
Yeah,
ticks are gonna thrive this year as well.
all right. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you. Thank you, Lloyd, for bringing this presentation with Mr. Coburn and Mr. Guffey today. We're on number 16, items from auditor. Special request for retail on sale, malt beverage, and wine licenses, Performing Arts Center of Rapid City.
Good morning, Commissioners. Cindy Mueller, Pennington County Auditor. We have before you the special request for the retail, exactly what you just said, special license for the Performing Arts Center of Rapid City. They want to hold a special event on July 26th from 4 p.m. to 11:30 p.m.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
So move.
Moved by Drews,
Second?
second by DeSanto. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Cindy. Item B is Uniform Grant Guidance Policy Procedures. We'll have two motions for this.
Yes, we would like to have a motion to basically reaffirm, and we've revised just a little bit, the standards of conduct and the limitations of purchases from employee-owned businesses. We did have a policy in place. Holly searched, Joan searched. We could not find the actual signed policy, so in order to make sure it was within this uniform grant guidance policy, we needed to reaffirm that.
Move for
Thank you.
approval.
Is that LaCroy?
Move for approval.
Sorry.
Second.
Moved by LaCroy, second by DeSanto. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Motion carries. Motion 2, please.
The next motion is to adopt the proposed uniform grant guidance policy and procedures as required by the federal government for the continuation of receiving federal grants.
Move for approval.
Moved by DeSanto,
Second.
second by LaCroy. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Cindy.
Commissioners.
Item 17, items from Buildings and Ground. Mike Cool, Jail Expansion and Remodel Project Construction Bulletin. Delete sewer line.
Good morning. Mike Cool, Director of Buildings and Grounds. I'm seeking board authorization to accept a proposal to remove the installation of a new sanitary sewer line from the jail expansion remodel project for a credit of $31,756.46. Through the process of designing this sewer line was implemented along the north side of the property line to allow us to connect new sewer lines for future remodels of the basement of the main jail building. Through some of the cost-cutting processes from the greater study of how to address issues within the jail, all the way up to the rebid of the project. This sewer line is not going to be utilized at this time. It would be something that would come down the road. So is my recommendation that we pull it out of the project since it is not going to be utilized. One of the reasons I believe that we should do this is that since the design for correcting sewer line issues in the basement hasn't been completed yet, we don't have a good basis for where that sewer line exactly should be relative to elevation and such. So it has a potential that it could be actually create problems down the road being in the wrong place.
Thank you, Mr. Cool. Any discussion or a motion, please?
I would move to approve the removal.
Second.
Moved by DeSanto, second by Ross Connect. Any other questions for Mr. Cool? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cool. Next is item 18, items from equalization assessment notice revisions. Shannon Rittberger.
Hello, Shannon Rittberger, Director of Equalization. So we had talked earlier, a couple of months ago, about changing the assessment notice and adding some information about the owner-occupied classification. Now is a good time to do that. Our current company that prints and mails our assessment notice says they're not going to do it anymore. So we have found another company, and when we find another company, you start from scratch and create the format, and it's a whole lot cheaper when you start from scratch than when you set it up and have to change it. So now is an excellent time to be talking about this. I've provided a copy of our assessment notice. This is the one that is, I think the mailed one comes front and back. The emailed one, you get 2 pages, but it's exactly the same thing.
Do you have a sample for the video or no? Just a hand one?
No.
Okay.
That looks pretty bad after what we just went through and all the PowerPoints, and I'm holding up this paper.
You said it. Just kidding.
So anyways, this is our assessment notice.
Thank you, Ms. Holly.
We are bringing this, Commissioner Ross Connect and I have worked on this. We're bringing this as a suggestion to make a change. And I think this is a very good suggestion, but up for your opinion. The the note we currently have is on one side of the assessment notice, and it just says, important, if this is your principal residence, please review this notice to verify that your property is classed owner occupied before the March 15th deadline. And that says everything that it needs to, but it gets lost in the verbiage there. And most of the verbiage on that side of the assessment notice is required by state law to be there. That explains the appeal process. So it has to be there, but it gets pretty wordy. I'm suggesting that on the flip side, the actual assessment notice where it indicates your assessed value and the classification and all of that, we add a paragraph
There you go. Thank you, Miss Holly.
right there.
Covered and saved by Miss Holly Henning. Thank you,
All right,
Holly.
thank you. So the paragraph I'd like to add, remove the one on the opposite side, that one sentence that just gets lost there, and add this at the bottom. Important, if this is your principal residence that you have owned and occupied since November 1st, please review the upper right-hand corner of this notice to verify that your property is classed as owner-occupied. The deadline to apply for an owner-occupied classification is March 15th of every year. Please go to our website at that address to complete an owner-occupied application or call our office for assistance. A property classed owner-occupied is taxed at a lower levy than non-owner occupied. Nice. And in the upper right corner, the assessment notice has always indicated either owner-occupied or non-owner occupied. That will stay the same. That's part of the data that's sucked out of the database and printed on the assessment notice. So I just highlighted that upper right corner just to show you that's where it is, that's where it'll always be. We're looking at adding this paragraph at the bottom on that page.
I like that idea.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner LaCroix.
I think that's a very good idea. Thanks, Ron, for being consistent and persistent on this. I mean, that's, at one time we were talking about the printers are going to be able to do this because it's outside printers, or might think of something else.
We, for quite a few years now, we have contracted out printing and mailing because the bulk mailing process has just got too complicated to handle in-house. So we send them a file, it gets printed and mailed by some other company.
And Lori, IT department director. I just want to point out that if this verbiage is not what you got, what we're going to do is we're going to make it so that you can change this verbiage at any point in time, and we will not have to go back to the vendor to have them make a software change. So this will be something that you guys can change every year if you decide this verbiage is incorrect.
And that was a problem initially when we started farming out this printing and mailing. It was set, and unless you paid for a change, you couldn't change it. Well, as this has developed over time, there's a text box there that we could decide, we want to reword that sentence. We could just do that next year if we wanted to.
Good. I think
it's much easier.
I think it's big and bold, and that's what a lot of Ron was talking about in complaints. I appreciate their work on this.
Keep in mind that this is not going to be highlighted like you see on the example. When we put anything on here that's other than black and white, it costs significantly. I've highlighted it just to bring it to your attention here.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Ross Connect, then DeSanto. You first, Commissioner Ross Connect. This was your project, sir.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I emailed that to Martin Diggler. This is kind of what started the whole process. And he wants to be involved a little bit, and I'll work with him on that. But he refers to page 1 and page 2. And is there really a page 1 or page 2? Or
there's no page numbers on them. I don't know. You pick which is 1 and which is 2.
Okay. I just wondered if there was a page 1 or page 2.
There's no page number on the assessment notice.
And this would be an opportunity to change principal to principal.
That's correct. I should have mentioned that ahead of time. Commissioner Ross Connect pointed out my misspelling. You're the second one in recent history who has pointed out something that has been published where I've used the wrong word again.
I've done it before too, so don't feel bad. Spell check.
I was just going to say.
Well, it's spelled right. It's just the wrong word.
Commissioner Ross Connect, can you tell us the history a little bit for people that don't know why this came about?
Yes, well, Martin's was just the transparency, and as Shannon said on the page one, let's just call it page one or page two. It, all that wording just kind of gets mixed up, and when we get these notices, a typical taxpayer will just look at three numbers, and that's what their assessed value is, and they really don't go into reading the text. And therefore, Martin, over a 3-year period, he just didn't realize that there was a benefit to being owner occupied, and he claimed that there could be better transparency. And so by doing this, and like Shannon said, the opportunity is right because we're going to different printing companies. This would be something that nobody can claim that there's not transparency. And we have the opportunity to modify that year after year after year. So I'm anxious to see that we're going to see some modifications this next year.
Thank you. Commissioner DeSanto, please.
Madam Chair, after going through this, Shannon, myself, I would like to see within this text, I'm afraid that people are going to assume that if they were occupying it as of November 1st, owner occupied, of 2019, for example, and then they apply for it by March 15th of 2020, that they are going to recognize a savings for their 2019 assessment. But if I'm correct, that would not be true. It won't be until their 2020 assessment that they recognize or realize that savings. And I think we're going to have a lot of people maybe coming in and saying, hey, I filed in time. How come I still have to pay the non-owner occupied rate?
And that we get those questions all the time. The problem we have is if we start explaining that here, it starts to look like this other page over here.
Okay, I understood that.
And the point is to try to get people to apply for it, and then maybe if we have to explain that, we do. But the important thing is here is look up, make sure you've got it now. The tax is going to be paid next year.
Okay, I understand.
Madam Chair.
I think it's very important, though, when they come in to apply, make sure that they know.
Yep.
They're not realizing that savings till the following.
And we explain that a lot.
Do you have a follow-up, Commissioner Ross?
Oh, yes. Yesterday I was at a closing at one of our title companies, and I'd mentioned to the gentleman that we were going to do this on the assessment notice, and he said, thank you, and thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Title company?
Yes, at First American Title. And they said that this has just been a problem for years. And I said, well, thank you, because he informed the buyer that you want to make sure you're going to go from non-owner occupied to, and so I was there with him trying to explain, and then I told him that we were enhancing our assessment notices, and so they were very appreciative of that. So I think it's a step in the right direction.
The owner-occupied classification requires action on the part of the property owner. The default is not owner-occupied. The default is not owner-occupied. Mm-hmm. The property owner has to do something to qualify for the owner-occupied classification. Unfortunately, realtors and title companies get blamed when a property owner fails to do something. And I think that's inappropriate because most realtors and the title companies do actually do something to help people understand this.
So Shannon, just a question. So if we have a motion on this, it'd basically be the motion to
accept the notices.
Accept the revisions of the assessment notice.
I don't know as if you need a motion. We are developing the assessment notice, and it's not really a priority right now. The first priority is going to be the delinquent tax bills that get printed first, and then the tax bills, and then our assessment notice. So we've got plenty of time to do this. I'm just bringing it here to say this is what I think we should do, and unless there's somebody has a serious change to this, this is what we're planning for the future.
So this is information only?
Yeah.
That's what you're telling me. Okay, Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Rittberger?
I do want to add one other thing. We are working with Planning and Zoning Office to create a brochure and a notice when a property owner comes in to apply for a building permit for a house. that they will be given a brochure that explains what owner occupied is, and think about this and how you qualify. I have a first draft of that on my desk right now. Carla in our office does the owner occupied classification stuff, and she created what looks like a really nice brochure, and we'll review that and give it to planning. And so anybody that applies for a building permit for a house or trailer house, I suppose, will get this.
Thank you. And that also came about with Mr. Roskinick, noticing that the building permit was a big part of it as well. So credit to also Mr. Commissioner Roskinick for doing that. I mean, he did his due diligence on all of this to make sure those notices and anything that could make it easier for the public. So thank you, Commissioner Roskinick, for your due diligence on all the work that we've done for these changes, sir.
Madam Chair.
And then, Shannon, thank your team as well from a commission. You have been working hard and always have with the rest of your team to follow up with this commission and others to feel like we can make it easier on the public to understand what we do in equalization with your videos and different things that you folks do. So we appreciate that as a commission as well, sir.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Shannon.
Shannon, don't ever say I didn't say anything nice to you. I'm kidding. Items from Highway Superintendent Joe Miller, please.
Morning again, Joe Miller, Pennington County Superintendent, Highway Superintendent. First up, we have the award recommendations for the bridge project repairs. Just to refresh your memory, this is for bridge delamination repairs on our Dark Canyon bridges, meaning the concrete is chipping down to the rebar, getting that cleaned out, and then filling it back in with a low slump concrete that'll fill the voids. Also applying the sealant to the top deck and the outside of the outermost girders. Basically, this is to protect the decks and the concrete from the salt, rain, snow. I witnessed firsthand yesterday when we were up looking at Norris Peak what the salt can do to the concrete. It's pretty corrosive, and if not or washed off, or there's not some sort of protection there, it can damage it greatly. So,
Thank you.
We only had one contractor bid on the project. That was JV Bailey Incorporated at the cost of $64,123. And that come in about $10,000 over what our engineered estimate was.
Okay. Is there any motions or
I'd make a
questions?
motion to award the contract.
Motion by Drew,
Second?
second by DeSanto. Any questions from the board? Not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. Item B, sir.
This is the county striping project program. I apologize, it's getting to you a little late in the year. I missed an email here a while back. So the state puts on a striping program. The state puts up $500,000 for all the counties in the state to apply for it. The amount the county gets is proportional to the amount of asphalt roads that they have to stripe. In Pennington County, we have 355 miles of asphalt total, and we're striping 294 miles of that. The county policy currently is we stripe any road that has a speed limit of equal to or greater than 35 miles an hour. So the Pennington County's limit for the program is $124,581. The state pays 60% of that, so that would be $74,832. Our county portion of that is $49,832. So our county is obviously over the limit for that. The amount over that limit is $208,755. So the total cost of the county is $258,588.41.
Okay, do we have questions?
Madam
or
Chair.
Commissioner DeSanto.
How does the state come to the determination of what amount we are allowed?
So we have to submit a worksheet with how many miles of asphalt, with edge lines, fog lines, double yellow lines, all of the criteria for the striping. And then they take a look at the counties, all the counties that apply for it, and it's proportionate based on the amount of miles submitted.
And so we exceed that just because of the number of miles of roads that we have. We have
Correct.
no control over it. It's not something that we've been remiss in not striping, and now we have to stripe a whole lot more than we should have done before, or something like that. It's just, every time this comes up, we're coming in under the.
Correct. And going back 10 years, that's about the average is about $260,000.
Okay,
And the mileage is about that as well.
thanks, Joe.
Any other discussion?
Move for approval.
Moved by, you
Second.
can't make the motion, DeSanto, but we'll go ahead and allow it. LaCroy. Motion by DeSanto, second by LaCroy. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. Item C, please.
So the name is kind of deceiving on this. I got it on my desk and went, what in the world is this? So did a little digging. This is actually a state safety project for high friction surfacing in corners. You would notice in the Keystone, by the Keystone Y is the most noticeable one. I think most people would know. The DOT put this down to try and eliminate roadway departure crashes or crashes in general. So since it's a safety project through the state pays 90% of it, and the county pays 10% of it. The county's portion is $15,121.36. Get into the accidents, or excuse me, we're going to put this on our road. We're going to try this on our roads, Nemo Road. It's actually South Canyon Road, but everybody calls it Nemo. With the intersection of Wideview into the S curves there, between Wideview and Schroeder. There's been, in the last 5 years, there's been 5 accidents there. And then on Deerfield Road, approximately the intersection of Ray Smith Drive, there's been 4 accidents there. So that's where the state would like to try this high friction surfacing. The surface, I've tried to do a little digging on exactly what it was, asking our engineer and Mark, and have to maybe do a little more digging. It's what we can come up with is it's some sort of resin with some really abrasive aggregate that they put down. Don't know for sure the process or any of that stuff at this time, but we'll do some more digging if you so wish.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Drews.
is this a one-time process, or is this?
That I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know if there's, I would assume just like any pavement, it's going to chip off with plows and stuff like that. So it's probably not a one-time deal, but I can't answer that.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner LaCroy, please.
I've seen some of this, and I think they're talking about they've done one of the exits from Box Elder with this type of deal. And I just happened to, after our Black Hills Area Association of County Commissioners Friday, I come back on Nemo Road when it's ready, and so just to see how it was, and I think that is a good spot to try it. I think you can kind of notice, like, we have some of them on bridges too, and so, and even if you go down into Deadwood, they had some down on the side of their street too there. So it's just interesting to see how it holds up under different conditions, but I think it's a good preventative measure.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner DeSanto, please.
from what I remember of some discussion of using this for the new Rochford Road project, basically, if Tom described it correctly, it's going to increase the surface, I guess, how the aggregate protrudes from the surface by approximately 1/8 of an inch. So it'll be great for rain and stuff like that, but don't make mistakes thinking that it's going to be great for ice, because once the ice fills in those, it's eliminated anyway. Right?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Ross Connect, second by Drews. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. Item D, Jim Street information. Commissioner DeSanto, please.
Okay, I had a chance to talk to a couple of the residents that's out there. One of them as late as just last night, thanks to Penny. I appreciate that, Penny. Dennis is the gentleman that we're going to be working with as far as removing the bushes at the end of Jim Street there. He's got a little bit of an issue with it because he likes the privacy, but as long as we're not removing or eliminating part of his property, we're just taking out the bushes. He understands the reasoning behind that. However, he did bring up a couple of other concerns that one of them makes sense to me. From what I understand, that road, now that it's opened up to the new neighborhood there, the speed has increased. People coming through there, the speed has increased, even though there's large potholes now. And one of the things that he suggested, and I'd like to talk to you about this as far as cost is concerned, Joe, is putting in 2 speed bumps. You know, equidistant apart from each other down that road, so that people aren't speeding through there. And if they do, they get to pay for the damage that they do to their own cars. After speaking to Penny, Penny is okay with us bumping the fence out so that she's only accessing Jim Road as an access point. And however, a question did arise, or it arose in my head, who's going to pay for moving that fence? So that's what we got to, is that going to be left up to the homeowner, or is the county going to take care of moving that fence for her? It's a brand new fence. She just put it in 2 years ago.
So that's something that would be up for discussion with you guys, I guess. You know, generally the highway department wouldn't pay to move that fence since it is on private property and we're
Right.
not, the road, you know, we'd have to take it onto the system to pay for that as well. So I guess that decision would ultimately lie with you guys, I think.
Okay.
Thank you.
Commission?
Just one question. We have many roads right now that are gonna need to be repaired. I guess the cost would be something that we need to consider right now because of the cost of roads and what we're gonna be replacing because of the flooding and the water.
Right.
That would be something to consider based on the information that we have learned today, and I didn't think about it till we just started talking about this road, but bottom line is, what is our budget, what is our priority, and is this on the list for what we're moving forward with? So, Joe, maybe you could answer that, based on guesstimate?
These are, you know, we did sit down and talk about the cost, right, initially. To use our recycled asphalt, which is the millings that we have in our yard, put those down, and then chip seal over the top of those. Keep in mind, this isn't to put any drainage in. About $13,000 to put that in. If you were to leave it gravel and put it on the system, you know, the initial cost to put 2 inches of gravel and then get it maintained, about $5,500. But there's, you know, with the gravel, you have to maintain it once a month at approximately $250 a time each time that you do it. So $3,000 a year. So you guys can do the math.
I don't
You're
know.
gonna eat up your $13,000 pretty quickly.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner LaCroy.
I'd make a suggestion that I appreciate all the hard work on this, but what I'd suggest is that it comes back to us with options, A, B, or C, with multiple options, and we also include that if we don't have the money, it would be no. But it sounds to me like there's 2 or 3 options that could happen. I'd like to have them seen and in writing, and to where I can evaluate them before.
And I apologize. I think we did, when this first came up, that was in the packet. I just didn't include it in this. I apologize.
Thank you. Do we have anyone from the public who'd like to speak on this? I know we haven't got any speaker requests on Jim Street, but if you'd like to come up and speak, come on up, sir, or ma'am. Sorry. Sorry. Stop. I do it all the time. Sorry, not to your sister. I apologize, ma'am.
That's all right. I'm Kathy Tiska, and I'm joint landowner with the aforesaid Penny. I just would like to request that when you do get to the point where you're working on that property, that you would allow us to kind of look at it and work with them, because ours is the fence that needs to be moved or figured out.
Okay.
That's all.
I appreciate that, ma'am.
Madam Chair, I got a question for the speaker.
Yes, sir, Commissioner LaCroy.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, for me?
As what was just discussed a few minutes ago, would you be willing to move your fence at your own expense if they took over the road? Because one of the things is city's not accepting responsibility for it and the county's not maintaining it. Would that be something you'd be willing to do?
We'd certainly be willing to consider that. That's what we kind of want to look at the cost of that, because we just paid to put that where it's at. So, yeah.
Sometimes the benefits outweigh the cost.
That's exactly right. Because it was a concern that people were starting to utilize our actual driveway
Yeah.
to make that right-hand turn to go further down the street. So it's already kind of in the back of our heads that maybe we should move a fence or something.
Okay.
But
Thank you.
yeah, I wasn't even sure what they meant by move the fence. You're talking about taking the fence from the edge of the trailer and moving it over to the road?
Correct.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
It would be to the right-of-way line, not necessarily the road, but the right-of-way line, which there's 40 feet of right-of-way there as well.
Yeah, I agree that the unfenced portion of the driveway is too long and people don't always respect that space. So I said, just would like to keep in the loop on that. Thank
Absolutely.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other questions?
Well, as far as Lloyd's comment to Joe was concerned, I guess what I'd like to see, we did originally, we were thinking about 3 different options, not including speed bumps. So an option with just chip sealing it, an option with chip sealing with drainage, and an option chip sealing or the additional cost of adding 2 speed bumps in there would be appropriate, I believe.
And Commissioner, I think when we do this, a lot of times you want to see on the petition, if there's some kind of petition, to see who's all in favor, because if you have most of the residents, if they're all in favor, that's good, but if you have people that don't, and, like
There are,
see what I'm
Madam
saying?
Chair, there are 4 residents involved, and from what I understand, listening to them, they're all in favor of getting that road chip sealed.
Okay, and to make sure that they know the consequences, like the fences and the bushes and all
Right.
that they're in favor of that as well. Okay? Thank
Gotcha.
you.
And Joe, clarify one more time for me, because I know you and Mark told me that day, but you saw that I was in a little bit of distress. So I don't remember too well. Were we going to put a stop sign there or a yield sign?
I was going to bring that up. With the corner clearance and the visibility, a stop sign, I think, is what is warranted. Especially if you say they're coming through there with some speed, a stop sign is definitely what's warranted.
Okay, and will there be a stop, I guess, will there be a stop sign at both ends or just at Jim Street oh, there is no crossroad at the other end, so it would just
There
be
is a crossroad,
Jim
but
Street and
that's
Pratt
not our
and
jurisdiction, so
Pioneer.
it would just be at Pioneer and Jim Street.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Nope.
Not? That was just information only, and then you'll just bring back some of the information at the next, do you need 2 weeks, or you're just,
Yeah, if you don't mind giving us 2 weeks, that would, so we
Okay.
can get some of this flooding stuff under control, so.
well, when's needed, I guess, is a good way to put it. If you need a month out.
When is the one in
because
July? I don't remember.
Hollywood's our meeting in July. What's the date? Is it the 3rd, or when is our meeting in July?
Yeah.
Do you need the second week because of all the other areas that you're
let's do
covering?
the
Second,
July 16th.
July 16th, is that okay with you, Commissioner DeSanto, that we?
Yes.
That for then? Okay,
Fine.
thank you, sir.
That'll give us time to assess what we have for damage and see what we're got budget-wise as well, so,
Thank you, and thank all your crew for their due diligence on everything they've been working on, sir.
absolutely. Thank you.
Do we have a motion to take a 5-minute break before Board of
So
Adjustment?
moved.
Second.
Moved by Roskinek, second by LaCroy. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. And your name, sir?
Yep, PJ Conover, Director of Planning and Zoning.
Thank you, sir. We need a motion to go into Board of Adjustment,
So
please.
moved.
Moved by
Second.
Drews, second by DeSanto. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. PJ, please.
Sure. Item A is variance 1904 for Keystone Adventures Incorporated. The request is from Andrew Bussey to reduce the front yard setback from 5 feet to 0 feet for an on-premise sign in a highway service district. I believe there's been some additional information that has come in from the applicant to the staff member who wrote the report, they're going to request a continuation. So I'll ask Cassie Bolstad to come up and fill the commission, and if you don't mind.
Thank you, PJ.
You're welcome.
Miss Cassie.
Morning, Cassie Bolstead, Assistant Planning Director. Yes, I received a voicemail from Andrew Bussey yesterday. He is not in the audience today. He is actually requesting that this item be continued to no later than the July 16th Board of Commissioners meeting. He is going to continue working with the Department of Transportation to address some of the concerns that they have regarding where he's proposing to place his sign, and see if he can get something worked out that maybe doesn't require this variance. So that would be his request.
Thank you, Ms. Cassie. Do we have a motion to continue till July 16th?
Move to continue.
Moved by Roskinick and second by
DeSanto.
DeSanto. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. A motion to close Board of Adjustment,
So move.
moved by LaCroy, second by Drews. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. PJ again.
Thanks, ma'am. PJ Conover, Director of Planning Department again. The next is a consent agenda. The Board of Commissioners uses a consent agenda to act on non-controversial and routine planning and zoning items quickly. The consent agenda is acted upon by one motion and vote of the board. Items may be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda at the request of a board member or a citizen. The consent agenda for planning and zoning contains the following items. Item B, second reading of rezone 1905 and comprehensive plan amendment 1905 for John and Ann Hovdenes, Fisk Land Surveying as the agent, and approval is recommended. Item C, item C, road construction within a section line right-of-way review, CS 1602, and approval is to end CS 1602.
Thank you. Is there anyone from the public who'd like to speak on item B or C from the consent agenda? Anybody from the commission? If not, a motion, please.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Motion by Drews. Second by LaCroy. Thank you, Commissioner. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, motion carries. We're on regular agenda items D through K.
Yes, ma'am. Item D is an appeal of conditional use permit 1906 for Big Game Storage LLC, Chris Peterson as the applicant. The Board of Commissioners don't see too many of these coming up from the Planning Commission, but in our ordinance, it allows a citizen to appeal a decision of the Planning Commission for a conditional use permit within 5 business days. This conditional use permit was approved by the Board of Commission, and within that 5 business days, an appeal was filed with our department, which then hence brings it forward before you today. The request or the appeal is for conditional use permit 1906 to allow a proposed lighted sign on existing storage units owned by Chris Peterson and his family. The applicant submitted a 12-page appeal document for conditional use permit 1906. In addition to that, the person who appealed, the Swansons, also mentioned conditional use permit 0435, which the applicant also holds, which allows the storage units to be on the property. So there's 2 distinct conditional use permits. CU 0435, which puts conditions on the storage units for the property, and conditional use permit 1906, which is just for the lighted sign proposal. The appellant or the person who appealed with the appeal of conditional use permit 1906, like I said, also mentioned some concerns with the applicant not meeting some of the conditions of the 2004 conditional use permit. I've addressed some of those concerns with the applicant, Mr. Peterson, and those can be considered as complaints, but for purposes of the appeal, we're looking at conditional use permit 1906 for the lighted sign. So that kind of brings everything in together. And again, because the board does not see too many of these, I'd like to let the board, let me see if I can find it, I apologize here, know that per our ordinance, section 510C, the county board shall vote to uphold, overrule, or amend the decision of the Planning Commission on this appeal. Again, the Planning Commission approved conditional use permit 1906 with 5 conditions.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
First, we'll have the applicant comment, if the applicant would like to come up. Is Mr. Peterson here?
Yes, he is.
Come on up, sir.
What photo? Not sure what. Okay. Okay, introduce yourself and then we'll ask.
I'm Chris Peterson, owner of Big Game Storage.
You got to defend your
About the
there's
complaints.
your letter. Yeah, there's your letter right there.
So, as PJ may have told you, there's never been a complaint on our property or anything we've done in the past year and a half. This is commercial property, not residential property. And all we're asking for is a lighted sign. The letters would illuminate, not shine a light, not be obtrusive. In no way can anybody from their house see this lighted sign. There's thousands of cars that go on Highway 44. It's about 600 feet off of Highway 44, and it would definitely improve my business, our recognition, and filling those storage units so we can pay our mortgage. My wife and I took a big loan out to try to make this work on this piece of property that used to be, for many years, a sawmill. I think a lot of people know that. And about the complaints, PJ and I went over those, and the signs are all met to code. I made sure to talk and discuss all the signs that I put on this property, other than the dirt sign that I'm selling, some topsoil that I recouped from doing the dirt work on this property myself and sharing it with a lot of people in the area with their gardens, some yard work, things like that, which I thought was nice because I've had about 4 people approach me and just want to buy it all, and I said, no, I'm going to share it with everybody around the community. There is a concrete pad in there that my neighbor has claimed that's going to be a RV pad for renting units. That's not true. That is my dog pad. So I'm in construction just 2 weeks ago. We just got our windows caulked. We're still construction. 3 weeks ago, I got a bid for 2 more storage units because they are filling and getting there. But until they're full, I'm not going to invest any more money into that yet. And I am working on Google and working on getting my rankings up. But here in Rapid City, there's 43 storage units that I'm competing with. But my location is very unique. And one of the reasons we built that in the location we did was because it's along Highway 44. There are no storage units out western Rapid City. And the people that have been using me and using the place, they love it. They say it's great because before they would have to go down the hill and all the way to Deadwood Ave is where a lot of storage units are, Deadwood Ave. So it's just very convenient for my neighbors and the people that live up on Johnson Siding. Outside parking, I've tried to keep the area really clean, nice. Boats, campers in a row, vehicles. I'm charging very minimal amount because people like to park their vehicles somewhere where they know they're safe. We have a security gate. I have security cameras, which are actually 12 on the property. But as you all know, inside of the Black Hills and other places, there's hills and they can't run their RVs and through and campers. It's very difficult for them. In Rapid City, they've got covenances. Joe Radigan is one of my neighbors to the south of me. He actually told the first boat customer of mine to park his boat on my property. So I didn't understand or know that was a need to put in the conditional use permit, that the outside parking. I thought if I gravelled it and it's part of the storage units, that it would be parking. I own a storage unit on commercial property, so I didn't quite know that was needed, but we can address it now.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Peterson, Board?
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Roskinen?
I did a site inspection last week and I sat down with Chris and we had a good long visit. I think that facility is very well constructed. It's doing what it's supposed to do. We've had A lot of discussion in the last few months, the difference between highway service and general commercial. General commercial being a more lenient commercial property. You can see it's zoned general commercial. With that being said, due to the quality and condition of the facility, I don't see any issues at all with that lighted sign, the way that it's going to be constructed. And it's facing to the north. I've lived up on Merrimack High for 20 years in the past. And as Chris said, that used to be Potter Sawmill. It was just 20 acres of blighted area. And I think this is a heck of an improvement. And for those folks that go to Pactola, this is a very good spot to put their boats, as they don't have to take them in the Rapid City. So if you're not going to see them in there in a row, you're going to see them scattered throughout the city. And so I think that was one of the reasons Chris wanted to put that facility there, is to capitalize on people not having to take their boats down Rimrock Highway, which gets pretty steep after you start going to the east. So I have no problems with it whatsoever. I think it's a very professionally put together facility.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Peterson?
Just a quick question.
Commissioner Drews?
Chris, do you live close by to that also?
We live on the property,
Oh, okay.
my wife and 2 boys. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Madam Chair,
Commissioner DeSanto?
I move that we uphold our approval of the conditional use permit, providing that he come in compliance with whatever he needs for the outdoor storage.
Okay, there's been a motion by DeSanto. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Drews. Thank you, and we do have some people that want to speak on this, so that doesn't mean there can't be a substitute motion at this point to change. So first we'll have Michelle Swanson. Okay, come on up here, Miss Swanson.
It wasn't just the Swansons who did it. It was also Dave Bradsky, Joe and Elise Radigan, and Sean and Heidi Crawford. So
Okay.
it was all the neighbors, or 4 of the 5 neighbors. A few of the concerns that we did have, that we called no fewer than 6 times to try to get clarification. We never got a return phone call on that. So that's part of the reason we have concerns, is that questions were not answered. So we see that the conditional use permit is for, I believe it was 1 on-premise sign, unlit, and 1 on-premise lit sign. Currently, there are already 2 on-premise unlit signs. And then he wants to add a 3rd. The conditional use permit is for 2 signs, 1 unlit, 1 lit. Adding the lit sign, there will be 3 signs. Am I correct in that? There's a sign on 2 buildings.
I think you're crossing conditional use permit 0435 with conditional use permit 1906.
Okay.
1906 was approved by the planning commission to allow the lighted sign he's proposing, so it has nothing really to do with 0435.
And so 0435, tell me about the signs, how they're permitted on 0435.
How they're permitted.
But there are currently 2 signs, and if it's 2 separate.
So the ones that she's asking about is there's some signs on the building. I'm trying to find them. When it's scanned, it didn't come across too well. Again, I know we're here for 1906 and not 0435, so if it's okay, I can answer it.
Yes,
She's not been able to get
she's just confusing the 2, but she's worried about the signs and how many. And I'm going to guess that the signs were permitted in the first, instead of 1906 as an amendment or addition to those signs. Am I correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
the ones that she has pictured here are the ones that show the hours of operation of the facility. We don't really consider those signs. The only time that we require any special permits for those is if they're lighted.
Okay.
And we've dealt with something like that from Three Forks. The other ones are the billboards, which he's in compliance with those as well, as far as the definitions and requirements for Pennington County sign ordinance. The only one was the dirt sign, the for sale sign, which was the spray painted one, which he said he's going to fix. Also, conditional use permit 0435 is due for review in September of 2022. But based on whatever the action of this board is, either to affirm, uphold, or to amend, we're going to do a review of that conditional use permit because the applicant has newer needs that he'd like to address. So the complaints that are being addressed are going to be be made public again with new letters of, hearing letters that'll be routed out to the applicant or the surrounding neighbors so that they're aware of like the outside storage, maybe any additional light signs that he wants to do. So that is the process to find a solution to what's going on that property.
So, Miss Michelle, what he's telling you is that this is about a lighted sign proposal, the sign he has today, and that conditional use permit for the other signs and the things that you're talking about is the other conditional use permit that will come up later.
Okay.
And do they have to be in the surrounding area? Will they be notified about the conditional use coming up?
Right, because because it's an increase in use, all landowners within 500 feet will be notified through certified return receipt letters.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, that, my issues were with,
This lighted sign?
and all the signs together, not realizing it was two different conditional use permits.
You're okay, ma'am.
We've got a bunch of lights, or a bunch of signs, wanting to be in compliance with all of those things before we move forward with more and more and more.
Okay.
But I believe Heidi and Elise may have
I have,
more in addition.
there is Miss Alice Radigan. Elise, I'm sorry, probably. Thank you, Miss. Thank you, Miss Radigan.
No, I just want to speak to this. Actually, I would not characterize this area as a blighted area prior to the units coming in. It was pasture, fenced in, green, just to fit very well with the scenic atmosphere of Highway 44. I'm a bit appalled by the storage units. I don't feel like they add to our area and the value of our property. We live down the road past the storage units. My husband Googled big game storage and nothing came up. And so he suggested to Chris that he should probably get a strong online presence versus putting up more lighted signs, because as he said, if people want to find out where there's storage, they're going to sit down and Google it, find out where it's at, find out what works for them, not drive around at night looking for a lighted sign. So we're kind of wondering, when is it going to stop? We just feel like there's a lot of signs. It's got visibility. It's right on the highway. We just question the necessity of additional signage and the lighted sign. So,
Thank you, ma'am. Next, we have Ms. Crawford. Heidi?
I don't need a picture. I'm Heidi Crawford. My property borders Abby and Chris's property, and we love them as neighbors. We love them as friends, and we're actually super happy to have them right next door to us, and our kids play all the time, and we have a great relationship. I think they've done a nice job of putting in the storage units. I think it looks good. It's nice natural colors. I like all of that. I am very worried about this lighted sign though, because you use lighting to change the ambiance. So if you go to a nice restaurant, they light a candle for you, it changes the ambiance. In my 4-year-old's preschool classroom, when the teacher wants everybody to get quiet, she lowers the lighting. Lighting changes the ambiance. And I don't want to live under a lighted sign. His office he put it as close to our front yard as you can get, legally, and it's in my front yard. So driving home, I would have to drive under a lighted sign to get into my front yard. That doesn't feel welcoming to me. That doesn't feel like home. And so I don't think he needs it. He has fantastic visibility from West Highway 44. You can't miss it. In fact, when people find out where we live, they say, "Oh, is that by the storage units?" Well, yes, it is. I mean, you can't miss it coming up the hill. He hasn't had to put any lighting in because the firehouse is right across the road from us, and it illuminates the whole storage units. And his big game storage sign, is right under the firehouse lights. So I honestly don't think that this lighted sign would get him one single more renter. But it will affect my property values, and it will affect
the feel that I have coming home, and here it is right in my front yard. So it makes me concerned about, living up there is not cheap. This is not cheap property to live up there. We're looking at doing, we just got a bid back for a $360,000 addition to our home and remodel. And I am really worried that, by the time we do the remodel plus what we paid for that, we would have over $660,000 into our property. If we have to sell it for some reason, somebody drives up the driveway, they have to go past what now looks like an industrial park feel. Are they going to pay what we have into our house? I don't know. I don't want to live under that sign. And I think it just absolutely changes it, because I'm fine with the storage units being there. I'm fine with all of that. But this is just kind of like insult to injury a little bit, where it really does change the feel of it, which is why it has to come before a board. And the only reason everybody wasn't nobody could make it to the first board. So or the first board meeting. So nobody came and said our concerns with our property values and that sort of thing. And this being a residential area, Chris and Abby bought this property knowing that it's in a residential area, knowing it's in an expensive residential area. And they said, we'll be really considerate of you guys. We'll be really considerate of the neighborhood. We're going to do a nice job with it. And they have really done a nice job. And I absolutely love them. So hopefully this doesn't affect our friendship at all. But they have the right to do what, they want and ask you guys what they want for their business. And we have the right to ask you to keep this a residential feel and not turn it into an industrial park feel. When here we have all this money invested into our residential property.
Does anybody have any questions for Ms. Crawford?
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Roskinick.
So you mentioned that you got a lot of illumination from the neighboring fire department. My perception is once that sign is put up, that's going to have minimal impact to the already existing light coming from that fire department. And if that light shone south to your property, I could understand your concern. But when you get past that sign going to the south from your property, I don't think it's hard to say because we're just making some assumptions, but I don't see where it'd have any negative impact. And as a real estate appraiser, when you say property values, I've never inspected a home yet at night. So I think that'd be hard to prove that would have an impact on your property value. That's just my 2 cents worth.
Thank you. Commissioner LaCroix?
I think Ron kind of answered my question, because what I gathered from your statement is that sign was facing right by your house. So do we have any pictures of where your house is and
how far is
sign is? 'Cause it looks like to me the building's facing the highway.
Right.
So from some of the comments, I was gathering that you're driving right underneath the sign.
I have to drive right past it to get to our house, and the building is right next to our front yard. And Radigans have to drive right past it, and another neighbor as well. Even having people over to your home, just a lighted sign doesn't make it feel like home. It makes it feel like you're coming into an industrial park. I mean, lighting just changes. It just changes the feel of it. The only thing that I see benefiting from this lighted sign is the person who's trying to sell it to Chris, because he's telling him that he can't be successful with the storage units unless he has a lighted sign. And I've driven around. I didn't check out all the storage units in Rapid City, but I haven't seen any that have a big, huge lighted sign on it. So I think he can be very successful without it.
Commissioner LaCroix, do you have a follow-up?
Well, the only follow-up I got is from the looks of the sign to me, and I've had to work with quite a few signs, is that's not a projecting out one. It'd be a light, looks like a light with the plastic behind it red, so it's not like it's a glaring.
I don't know if we'll have a glow from our front porch. I mean, the way that it's angled, we might get a little bit of a glow from it, but even just driving driving home, I mean, it's right next to our front yard and our driveway, and we haven't complained about a single thing. We we've helped him every way we can. I've been sending Chris how to get Google listings because he does have a hole in his marketing campaign, and his hole is that he does not have a good online traffic. He doesn't have good online presence, and so I've sent him like, you need to get on Google. Here's how you get on the map, Google Map. Here's how you do your business listing. Because when you Google storage units Rapid City, he doesn't come up. So that's the purpose of this sign, is to get his website out there, but that's preaching to the choir because that sign is already for people who are driving by and say, oh, hey, there's storage units here. That's awesome. That's, he's going to get a lot of traffic from Pactola this summer. People are going to know he's there. What he's missing is people who aren't driving past and don't see his big billboard and don't see the storage units there. So that's where he needs to get a Google listing where people can Google Rapid City storage units and he shows up in that. That's the traffic he's missing. He's not missing any traffic on West Highway 44. And I'm being his friend. I'm being his friend when I'm telling him this.
Thank you, Ms. Crawford.
One last question for
Okay.
PJ. If I remember right, one of the conditions is that this light goes off at 10.
Right, that was actually brought up by the applicant that he was going to have this lighted sign on a timer. It would not be on 24 hours a day.
Okay.
Madam Chair.
I'm going to speak for just a sec, Mr. Rushton, I haven't spoke. Couple of things. I just had some people come up on the storage unit out in the valley, and they love their neighbor and they love the storage unit. So it's a lighting coming through and glowing. And I understand the safety factor because you have people's stuff in your storage units. I understand the lighting in that because you got to have security. But there's got to be something where those lights are pointing more down and it's not looking like it's glowing around the other properties. Because this neighbor also told me that they love these people and their storage unit is beautiful and everything is amazing about it, except that it shines right. It looks like the sun coming through their window. So there's got to be something for the lighting that we can change or do, or, so they talk about the lighting at night when you're in spaces where people want that darkness in a sense, but there's got to be some kind of solution for this lighting for the neighbors as well. So how we get there, I don't know, but I would actually like to go out there and look what this property looks like at night and see if there is, because it's going to be a concern later as well. So if the commission doesn't mind, if we could continue this for 2 weeks, and the applicant, I know that's kind of putting you out a little bit, but it's best for us before this comes up and you come up for your next review to know that lighting, and maybe we could find some solution with the neighbors. So if anybody besides me would like to continue this and move it, give me time to go look and kind of look at this property, I would appreciate it.
I think that's appropriate.
Is there a continuing motion on this, please?
I'd move to continue to the first meeting in July.
Moved by DeSanto. Substitute?
Substitute, yeah, thank you.
Sorry, Commissioner.
Motion.
Is that a
Oh, it's a
substitute,
substitute
Commissioner?
motion? I
Yes,
would
sir.
make a substitute motion that we move this to the first meeting in July.
Is there a second? I'll second that for discussion. I'd appreciate it because I'm just, this is another issue that just had came, and I didn't really think about it at the time. And then I went and looked at the pictures, and then I went out there, and it was glowing a bit. And it's actually East Rapid City. So bottom line is, I just kind of like to look at this property all the way around because it's going to come up again in the future. So, sir, would that put you back if we continued it for 2 weeks for me to come out there, and any other commissioner that would like to come out?
No problem. I've waited 2 months, so 2 or more weeks will be fine.
And I'll call you before I come out, sir.
Yes. And to explain the lights, they are LED.
Okay.
So again, the letters glow. So only in the evenings and from my business hours, or from 6 in the morning till 10 at night,
Right.
I have agreed with my neighbors to make sure that there's a timer and the lights go off. But only the letters would light up so that people that are traveling by would be able to see it.
Okay.
The big time period of renting storage units is in the fall.
Right.
And it gets dark at 5, 6 in the evening. So that's where I was only wanting about 4 hours there. Let people remember big game storage, big game storage. So I'm trying to Fox Den is my biggest competitor here in Rapid. Everybody's seen them. They've got the big lighted sign along the interstates.
And maybe
Fox
some
Den.
of it is we can visit with people that you can point those a certain way too, so they're still protecting your property and still not with the big game, but if you're adding to that lighting, I know this is about the big game lighting, but that's adding to the illuminance of the property already. Am I correct? Because even for our building over on East North, we have the cameras and stuff, and you have to have a certain amount of lighting. Otherwise, you're not going to see what you need to see either. So we have kind of worked with the neighbors, so they have said if you could point the lights a certain way or put them in a certain spot so you could still see what you need to see, but still think about the neighbors in the surrounding area, sir.
Sure.
See what I'm
Madam
saying? Thank you.
Deb, I assume that those are going to be in a can. When I say can, there's a lot of different types of lighting. You got direct and indirect, and if those are in a can, you're not going to get that residual effect that you're talking about, ma'am. They're going to be in a can. The only thing that you're going to see is people driving by. They're going to see big game storage. You're not going to see that residual light. We had a commercial business over by Three Forks, and he put incandescent lights out with a shade. That I can totally see. I mean, that is causes a negative impact to the neighbors. But if these are in a can, and the only people that are going to see that would be the transients go up and down Highway 44, I don't think it's going to be as intrusive as you think it's going to be. And then another item, when they bought that property, they bought the 20 acres and they also bought the permit. So they wouldn't have probably bought that if Joe hadn't permitted that property for a storage unit. So they spent a considerable amount of money using that for an investment. And I sit there as general commercial. There are a lot of other uses that somebody else could have done under general commercial. There'd be a lot more intrusive, a lot more traffic than a storage facility. So I think that's something that we ought to take into consideration.
We think they've done a beautiful job. He's done a great job. He's a great neighbor. No, I have zero complaints other than I don't think the lighted sign is necessary. I don't think it's in his best interest. I think he's wasting his money. And as the neighbor that's right there, I'm saying I hate it. I'm saying I absolutely hate that sign or the thought of that sign being up. And if I went to sell my home, I guarantee you, because it's offensive to me, it would be offensive to possible home buyers that would be looking at buying a home for $700,000.
My rebuttal would be that I've lived at Johnson Siding for 20 years, and you got the Fireside Inn with the same quality of houses, and you got Johnson Siding with the standard sign. And the problem is bringing the commercial to the residential. The two have to meet sooner or later, and that commercial lot, because it has all that frontage on Highway 44, it's meant for commercial. And I think a commercial property owner should have the right to put up lighted signs if they want, as long as they can do it in a manner that it does not negatively affect the neighbors behind. And so I guess that's what we're going to do a little investigating on.
And that might be a matter of opinion.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner LaCroix, or Commissioner Drews first, please.
Chris?
Yeah.
Chris, you stay here 1 second, please. Chris, I understand when you said your business hours are from 6 to 10. Is that when people can access their storage units also if they're renting from you?
That's correct.
Okay, they can't access them 24 hours a day then?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so there's been sorry, Commissioner LaCroix. I forgot Commissioner LaCroix.
My comment is this seemed to get convoluted because we're talking about a sign and then all of a sudden we're talking about the rest of the lighting. And, the young lady just confirmed that it's the sign, not everything else is okay. They have no problems with that. So I'm a little confused with I understand you guys want to go look. I have no problems with that, but I think we got kind of convoluted, so I probably won't support the motion. Thanks.
It's, for me, 6 to 10 is still adding, to whatever light is out there. And most people don't go to bed or they're entertaining or whatever between that 6 and 10, and they're after that, is a little bit different. So, I guess that's why I asked for the continuance. Plus, this is gonna come up again, so we're just getting kind of ahead of the game, and Mr. Peterson said he didn't mind if we continued it. So, those are kind of the reasons why I'd like the continuance. There is a motion
Chair?
on the floor for continuance. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner,
Aye.
I mean,
Oh, Commissioner, wow. No.
PJ, sorry.
I just wanted a clarification because I've heard the board say continue to the first meeting in July.
Yes,
And then I've also heard continued for 2 weeks. 2 weeks is June 18th. 4 weeks is the first meeting in
I'm
July.
sorry, June 18th would be
Just wanted
my
to clarify.
motion. Sorry, I'll amend that to June 18th. Is that okay with you?
June 18th?
Yes, sir, instead of July. I forgot it was,
Oh, pardon me. Yes, I would amend my motion to make that June 18th.
thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. All opposed?
Aye.
4 ayes and 1 no. Thank
Madam
you.
Chair, one final
Commissioner?
question of PJ. PJ, the Peterson property, is that the only commercial property right there?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, board, for that due diligence on that. I know I will be out there just looking, and any other commissioners. I appreciate that. Item E is road naming Fern and Ross Johnson. Ms. Brittany.
Good morning, Brittany Molitor, Environmental Planning Supervisor. This item was continued from the previous Board of Commissioners meeting in order for some people to meet with the applicants and try to find a solution so both property owners could essentially have the address that they want. I do believe that that has come to pass. We did receive an email from 911 yesterday, the head of 911, Kevin, and he is in agreement that they could both keep their, or Mr. Halsworth could keep his address off of South 79, and then road could still be named Providence Way. I believe the fire administrator is in concurrence with that also. So,
Do we have a picture so I can kind of tell
Good.
or show? I went out there with fire administrator. I worked with Kevin Carley, and then he checked with DOT. And I guess in this sense, DOT, this isn't in their right away, if I'm correct. So,
oh, is this the, sorry, excuse me, is this the, what you're talking about?
well, yeah, something like, yeah, they'd have to put out some kind of sign like that. Brittany, if you want to show the commission. So, if you want to pass these down. So when we went down there, fire administrator Jerome and me went down the section line on this property. Do we have the section line where the road, or we do, sorry, Brittany, I lost my mind here. So if you look at Mr. Halsworth is the white building, 79's to your right. If you look where Mr. Halsworth's property is, kind of like that square, and I apologize, I didn't bring the pictures. If you look where the corner on the left-hand side of his property where the triangle's at the top, that's where the sign would go. It would point, one way would go to Providence Way and the other way would point toward Mr. Halsworth's property. Number 2, Mr. Halsworth does have a mailbox where Brittany's dot is, pretty much. There's a mailbox, and then there's another sign on his building, and then there's a sign where the grassy knoll is, kind of the mailbox is there, then the grassy knoll, there's another sign, and then there's a sign on his fence where is that kind of square top. The sign would be to the left of the square top, facing north there. So that seemed to be the ultimate spot to put a sign, and for 911 and fire administrator, for first responders to be able to distinguish the difference between Providence Way and Highway 79. So I'd stand for any questions from the board, or I'll just move to Mr. Halsworth. Mr. Halsworth?
Thank you, Madam Chair and board members. Dan Holsworth. Appreciate the efforts, the site visit of what you've done. I was able to talk to Ms. Hancock out there on the property. We did agree on a spot that would work well. I felt that it was a good condition, and I appreciate everything that was put forth on energy for this. So I thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you, sir.
Great, Dan.
So, PJ, can you tell me, we just do the motion to approve the road naming of Providence Way as presented with a stipulation that the sign be put up, if I'm correct, as we said, an arrow pointing one way and an arrow for Providence Way pointing the other.
Yes,
Second.
Okay, I guess I made the motion and LaCroix seconded. Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries.
Thank you.
You did the work, so.
Thank you, Deb.
Thank you. Item F, please. Thank you, Lou.
Good morning again, Brittany Molitor. I think it might be afternoon. Item F is a request for Mr. Lauren Lippert to request to waive the requirements to approve a road in a section line right-of-way. He wanted to waive the requirements to waive all of the requirements of Ordinance 14 standard in order to construct this road. Staff did route this through the interdepartmental review, and during such time the Pennington County Highway Engineer had some concerns. He did agree with waiving the engineered road construction plans. However, he was opposed to waiving the cross slope requirement since a 24-foot wide road would need cross slope for drainage. He was also opposed to waiving the minimum 18-inch culvert requirement. He was opposed to waiving the requirement for having a cul-de-sac or some other means of turnaround on a dead-end road. He also had concerns that Ordinance 14 requires that approaches shall be constructed perpendicular as practical to a county road. He said to accomplish this, the road will need to be extended past the house, and an approach permit from county highway would be required. Staff does agree with county highway's concerns. If the applicant were to extend the road 70 feet from the center line of his driveway, I believe it's in your packet here, then the issue of the turnaround and the perpendicular approach would be addressed. This is the drawing that's in your packet is from our subdivision regulations that we utilize for turnarounds. So staff does recommend that the road be constructed to Ordinance 14 standards, except for submittal of engineered road construction plans. And this just, this portion of the section line will service a single-family residence in a general agriculture district.
Thank you. So you agree with number F, but not number G?
No, we do agree with F, but not waiving all of the requirements of Ordinance 14, only waiving the requirement to submit engineer road construction plans, but all other requirements stand.
Okay, thank
I
you.
would move to approve.
We have the applicant, let's let him speak if we can
sure.
first. Thank you, sir.
He wants to talk.
Mr.
now that he
Lippert,
knows I'm
sir?
gonna approve it.
Did you want to speak?
Not here. He's not here.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I would move to approve in accordance with the county highway engineer's recommendations
And that'd be the staff recommendations too as well.
and staff recommendations.
Okay, there's been a motion by DeSanto,
Second.
second by LaCroix. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. Item G.
And item G is road construction within a section line right-of-way, CS 1902. To construct a road, the applicant is requesting to construct a 24-foot wide road within the section line right-of-way between sections 2 and 11 for approximately 1,350 feet. Access would be off of Antelope Creek Road. This section line is currently unimproved. It's just a 2-track trail that access to agricultural property. As the property stands today, the existing conditions is Lot 7, Grass subdivision, which consists of 58.89 acres, and it is in a general agriculture district. There is special flood hazard area on this property to the north. All of Section 11, which consists of 640 acres, which is general agriculture district, and the southwest quarter, the southeast quarter, and the southeast quarter. The southwest quarter, which is 80 acres in the general agriculture district. The proposed road construction, they would like to construct a 24-foot wide road with 6 inches of gravel. The road grade would be less than 5%. We did already speak to the request to waive the ordinance standards, and you guys just made a motion that it is only, that engineered road construction plans are not submitted. The applicant also currently has a road naming application to name this portion of the section line right away to Lippert Ranch Road, which you guys will see at a later commission meeting. But staff is recommending approval of this request to construct the road with 9 conditions.
So do we have a motion per staff recommendation?
So moved.
Moved by
Second.
LaCroy, second by DeSanto. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed, motion carries. Item H, please.
Morning, Commissioners. Jason Thinnis in the Planning Department. So we have item H is layout plan LPL 1910 to create lots 8A and 8B of Collins Addition. Applicants and owners are Brad and Colleen Kurtz. Surveyor is DC Scott Surveyors Incorporated. General description, the applicants, Brad and Colleen Kurtz, are requesting to create proposed lot A and B out of existing lot A of Collins Addition. Purpose of the subdivision is to create 2 separate lots. As it stands today, Lot 8 of Collins Addition is zoned general agriculture, consists of 10.5 acres, takes access off of Highway 385. There are no structures or utilities on the property. Proposed lots, Lot 8A and Lot 8B of Collins Addition, will be zoned limited agriculture district. Lot A will be 3.18 acres. Lot 8B will be 7.32 acres. This does not meet the minimum lot size requirements for limited agriculture district. Therefore, is a rezone and comprehensive plan amendment or lot size variance will be required for the 2 proposed lots. Both lots will have access off 385 via a 40-foot shared access easement, as you can see in the slide. The request was sent out for interdepartmental comment with no significant comments received. Therefore, for purposes of layout plan, staff finds no significant issues with the applicant's request, and staff recommends approval for layout plan LPL 1910 with 9 conditions.
We have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Drews,
Second.
second by Roskinick. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. Item I.
Good afternoon, Cassie Bolstead, Assistant Planning Director. Item I is another layout plat request. This is layout plat 1911 and subdivision regulations variance 1904. This is a request to create lot 10, block 3 of the ranch at Black Gap and to waive platting requirements. The applicant is Double L Properties. The surveyor is Spurlet Consulting. As this property exists today, it is within the Ranch at Black Gap Plan Unit Development. Currently sits at 25.033 acres. Access is off of Black Gap Road, which is within the Ranch at Black Gap Road District, and it's currently vacant. What they are proposing to do is not change this lot at all, other than to plat it. They are proposing to just put this as lot 10 of lot 3 at the Ranch of Black Gap. It would stay the same lot size. They're also requesting to waive 2 subdivision regulation requirements. One would be percolation test and soil profile hole information, and the other would be road improvements to Black Gap Road. This was routed through the interdepartmental review process. There were a couple items that I do want to point out to the commission. The county on-site wastewater specialist stated that if the applicant plans on installing a septic system on the property, staff would recommend they conduct the percolation test and inspect a profile hole. This area has very restrictive soils and natural springs that have caused several septic problems in the past for the residents who live in Black Gap. The Register of Deeds wanted the located in section of the plat heading corrected, which is included as a condition of approval. And then Rapid City Community Planning and Development stated that they are also currently in the process of reviewing a preliminary subdivision plan for this lot as well. They are proposing this plat to create one platted lot and eliminate an existing non-transferable balance. Kale from Spurlick Consulting came up during the Planning Commission meeting and explained that a little bit more. They are just wanting to transfer ownership of the property and cannot do that with it in its current state. That's why they're proposing to create the platted lot so that they can just transfer it between owners. The majority of this property falls within the Rapid City's 3-mile platting jurisdiction. There's just a little tiny portion in the east corner that falls within our jurisdiction. So due to that, that's why they're having to plat through us and through the city. Their plat will have to include signatures and certificates from both city and county entities when it's filed. And so this proposal does not change density or anything about this lot. So staff found no significant issues with what they're requesting. Staff was recommending for subdivision regulations variance 1904. Staff was recommending approval to waive improvements to Black Gap Road, but staff was recommending denial of the waiver of percolation test and profile hole information. However, the Planning Commission did recommend approval of both waivers. And then staff was recommending approval of layout plat 1911 with 10 conditions.
Any questions for Cassie?
Move for approval.
Second.
Moved by LaCroy, second by Drews. Any other discussion?
Madam Chair, can I just clarify, is that for both subdivision regulations and layout plat? Or do you want to do them in separate motions?
Commissioner LaCroy?
What's your recommendation?
The Planning Commission did them in separate motions.
How about, do we have any discussion on the others that we have concerns that we need to not waive? How about that? Okay, so I think we'll do them all in one, Miss Cassie. If that's okay at the board?
Yep.
Okay, so we have a motion by LaCroy, second by Drews. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Cassie. Item J. Jason?
Hi there, Jason Fennison again, Planning Department. Item J is layout plan LPL 1912 to combine 2 lots to create lots 1, 2, and 3 of O'Sullivan subdivision. Applicant is Jim Peterson. Owner is John O'Sullivan, surveyors Britton Engineering. The applicant is requesting to combine 2 tax parcels and then subdivide that to create 3 residential lots.
Thank you. Any questions or motion?
Move for approval.
Moved by
11
LaCroy.
conditions.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by DeSanto. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Jason.
Yeah.
Miss Cassie.
I'm back. All right. Last one for planning and zoning. Okay, so this is Major Plan Unit Development Amendment 1903. This is a request to amend an existing plan unit development to allow for additional lots to be developed. The applicant is Bill Freitag. The owner of these properties is Prairie Valley Development. Currently, there are 2 properties that we're looking at. Both of these are within the Prairie Fire subdivision and the Prairie Fire Plan Unit Development. The Prairie Fire Plan Unit Development was created originally in 2005 and then amended in 2006 to allow for 75 residential lots, 1 well lot, and 1 detention lot with a minimum lot size of ½ an acre. The last time that plan unit development was reviewed was in 2016, and it was continued. What Mr. Freitag is proposing to do is he is proposing to add density in these 2 areas. These 2 properties do fall within the 3-mile platting jurisdiction. So the Rapid City Community Planning and Development did state that they are currently reviewing a preliminary subdivision plan to subdivide those 2 properties into 89 residential lots. They are proposed to look like this. The way they are proposing these 89 residential lots is it looks like the lots will range in size from about 0.22 acres to about 0.56 acres. Currently, condition number 1 of the existing Prairie Fire Plan Unit development restricts the size of the development to no more than 75 lots with a half acre lot size. So there are currently 37 platted lots within the Prairie Fire subdivision. 35 of those lots are developed with structures on them. Again, he's proposing to add 89 residential lots in 2 phases. There was also a document provided by KTM Design Solutions on April 8th that should be in your packet that kind of gives a little more detail to what they're proposing here. The new lots will be served by Rapid City Sewer and Water Utilities. They're saying the minimum lot size will be no less than 7,400 square feet. The minimum lot width will be no less than 50 feet. The minimum lot setbacks are proposed to be 20 feet front yard, 8-foot side yard, and 20-foot rear yard. This document from KTM also stated that the proposed number of dwelling units will be no more than 109 single-family housing units. Staff initially was a little concerned about that comment because if you add that to the 35 lots that are already there, it put you at about 145 lots. So staff was a little confused whether the 109 included the already platted lots, where that number came from. I did have a conversation with Mr. Freitag yesterday. He stated he is proposing 89 additional lots. The 109 was the maximum that they would put in this area for newly developed lots based on that 50-foot frontage. But that's not what he states that he is going to do moving forward. The 89 lots is what he's putting in there, is what he told me yesterday. So since sewer and water is now available in this area, was installed in around 2017, it does appear that a higher density is appropriate for this area. So staff and the Planning Commission did recommend approval of Major Plan Unit Development Amendment 1903 with 11 conditions.
Thank you, Ms. Cassie. Motion or discussion, board?
Move for approval.
Moved by LaCroy. I'll second for discussion.
Question.
Commissioner Drews.
So Cassie, the number of lots then, is that the same now as it was when I went through the planning commission?
Yes. Yep. I just, if you remember at the Planning Commission, there was that discussion about why there was 89 in one spot and 109 in the other. That's what I clarified with Mr. Freitag. He said that the 109 was the absolute maximum, and that's not what he wants to do. He wants to stick.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood you when you first said that, so.
Thank you. We do have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cassie. Items from chair and commission members. Item A, we brought this forward with Mr. Halsworth. If you'd like to speak first, Mr. Halsworth. And this is Deerfield Lake, South Dakota, consideration of new wake restriction.
Thank you, Board. Again, I appreciate you hearing me today. I will be going to the meeting on the 6th in Pier for this, for the No Wake Lake, to refresh you on that aspect of it. I was very pleased that when Ms. Hadcock was out looking at the property on the mailbox, the young man that she had with her, we mentioned about the Deerfield reminder, and
That'd be the fire administrator.
and he was
Jerome
feisty
Harvey.
right off the bat. I mean, it was an excitement that just energized the whole situation. So, which was true to my heart with everything that has occurred and where it has went. What they have, Jerome had basically a letter to Christy Nome, also to the Secretary of Game Fish and Parks. Also shared with me the development of all the emails to all the representatives that this has went out to, and talking with Jerome a little bit more, as far as a hard copy, it basically reflects everybody in that representation along with the governor. The paddlers letter that he had referenced is a very big strength with 600 members that are, of course, opposed to this situation. And Jerome's 2 letters are very powerful. I'll let him speak on that situation of where we're at on that circumstance. I am still very privileged to have the support of the commissioners, and I would be very proud to hand carry that letter to the meeting on Thursday also and represent it for you if allowed to do that. Along with, I'm going to read my letter where if you don't mind, I'll read quickly to you.
Go ahead, sir.
And then we'll allow Jerome to go from there and then hopefully gain your support and keep your support. I basically listed Deerfield Lake was established in the 1940s and has been a no-wake lake for 55 years as a natural trout reproducing lake. I being born and raised in Rapid City and having a place at Mountain Meadow Resort for 40 years, have felt Deerfield Lake was built in God's country to be a natural mountain lake fed by Ditch Creek and Castle Creek. I am one of 4 owners of Mountain Meadow Store and Campground, and of all of our summer campers' families, the reason for coming up to our resort is the ability to bike, canoe, kayak, paddle boat, hike, pontoon, and take a nap under a tree if they'd like. Why? Because it's quiet. They can fish from the shore, fish inlet streams, enjoy wildlife, swim if you're a mountain tough person. Why? Because it's a no-wake lake. As far as Ken's comparison from summer to winter activities is a night and day. There is no comparison. I am an avid snowmobiler and a family of ice fishermen. This is a lame argument. Please don't ruin this Black Hills Trout Lake by allowing petition number 7 to come into effect to pollute, to be overfished, cause more overhead for enforcement to our Deerfield Lake. I do oppose this, and if others don't like our laid-back, quiet, take your time to enjoy around you lake atmosphere, stay home, or go to any of the many other lakes in the area that allow higher speeds. Save Deerfield Lake.
Thank you,
Madam
Mr.
Chair.
Ellsworth. Yes, sir.
Can we get an
Commissioner
amen?
Amen.
There is a mountain tough
Got one.
person on this board.
Pastor DeSanto.
So I do appreciate that, and I appreciate your support. And if
Thank
that,
you.
I'll let Jerome speak.
Thank you.
Thank
Jerome Harvey, would you like to come up and say a few words? Sure. I was going to say the nice young man gets to come
State
up.
your name.
What's your name, sir?
Jerome Harvey, private citizen. Again, just talking with a gentleman yesterday with Dan about the what's going on with the proposal from number 70 to Game Fish and Parks. I do not speak for those other organizations, but I'm aware that Black Hills Paddlers, Dakota Trout Unlimited, Black Hills Fly Fishermen, those organizations are all opposed to the Wake Lake. My father had the privilege of being on Deerfield Lake the first day they opened it up for fishing, and it has never had a wake on that lake. It clearly is not only detrimental to the environment of the lake, to the fishery there, to the people who, it's again a multi-use lake. And our letters to the state representatives and to the commission, we do, to the Game Fish and Parks Commission, we do address the fact that there are safety issues with it. There's no cell phone coverage at Deerfield Lake. You're an hour and 11 minutes from the nearest dive and water rescue team to cover that. I've spoke with the chief at Hill City, Craig Comer, and he's in agreement with that. It brings up several safety issues along with it. And again, our position from Save Deerfield Lake is leave it as a no-wake lake, leave it alone. It's not a lake for fast boat fishing on it. It's not a lake that if it went to 25 miles an hour, it would turn Deerfield into an no-wake lake. And it was originally never set up for that. The memorandum of understanding between the Bureau of Reclamation and the U.S. Forest Service in 1964 clearly states that. The Game Fish and Parks lawyer or position was that doesn't affect them. We don't agree with that. That's what it was set up for. That we need a lake that is still a large lake where people can get on and enjoy. That's what Deerfield was for.
So you don't have any passion for this young man?
No, I don't. No, it's just being able to go out with my father, for example, and the fact he was there the first day that it was opened up for fishing, and be able to speak with my grandfather who was there as they built the lake. It was never set up to be a fast boat lake. It never was. And we've lost enough access to these lakes in the Black Hills were never set up for multi-species fishing. They were set up for trout lakes. And this is the last pure trout lake that we really have. That's a class 1 trout lake. And I've seen what happens in other areas when you lose that designation, you lose that area. Not only is it going to affect your economy, but you'll lose all the other issues that go along with it. So.
Thank you, sir.
Madam Chair.
Commission Office, Holly Hennies first, please.
Madam Chair, I got an MO at 1 o'clock.
Okay.
I just wanted to ask the board, I believe your motion is simply to approve the letter of opposition. If you would add to that, if that's the wish of the board, for Mr. Hallsworth to have permission to carry that to peer in case they question what his authority is to speak on behalf of the Board of Commissioners. Because we missed the deadline to submit it as part of the official record. So the only way they're going to know about it is if he carries it to peer on Thursday. So I just think it's appropriate to add him into the motion.
Is that okay with the board?
That was going to be my motion.
Okay.
Sorry, sir.
Good job.
So Lloyd made the motion with the authority with Mr. Hallsworth carrying our letter. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by LaCroix, second by Drews. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries.
Thank you,
Item-
Dan.
Item B, Black Hills Association of County Commissioners. That'd be Miss Holly Hennings.
Yes, commissioners, this is the time of the year when we need to start discussing any proposed resolutions that this body would like to forward on to the Black Hills Association of County Commissioners and thus up to the South Dakota Association. I haven't heard anything specific that may be of interest to this board moving forward, but now's the time if you do want to do something to give staff the direction to go and do the research and write the resolution and bring it back for approval.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Drews.
Holly, one of the things I think we should pursue, and Harding County indicated that they were going to do that the other day too, was to propose legislation to eliminate the 2 mil limit on counties when you end up with having to pay for protests. That still is a state statute at this point in time. I think that as part of our region, the Black Hills County District, hopefully would be in support of that type of resolution. So whether we develop our own or just follow in behind what Harding County is proposing makes no difference to me, but I think that needs to come out of our group.
Okay.
Thank you. Just a thought just came up. When we go to the conferences, if there's any other funding source that this county can find for help in different areas, I'm hoping different counties from around the United States have some kind of different funding source, because we're not being able to get that state sales tax in any way from the state. So I'm hoping when we go this next conference, or any ideas that this board might have that we can bring forth to the Black Hills County of Association of County Commissioners, I would hope that we can do something about our funding sources, because we're getting a lot of diversion back to the county and not enough money to take care of everything that we need from the state and other entities. So just a food for thought kind of information, guys.
Yes, the other one that I'd bring up to the board, and I'm not sure how the timing would work on this, is maybe a resolution of support for mental health services with the state. You know, that study with the Helmsley grant is due September 30th. And if we wait another year, we're going to be too late to hit the legislature in 2020. So
good point.
Again, I'm not sure of the timing or what we would necessarily say in it, if it's appropriate to do it now. I just don't want to miss the timing.
I think that's a good idea, Holly, only too, because I could see some diversion, and we already know we lead the way on many things in the county for those kind of programs. So bottom line, Holly, I'm in agreement and
Yeah.
I think your board looks like they're in agreement as well, so good point, Ms. Holly.
That's
Madam
okay
Chair.
with the board. I'd like to visit with Sheriff Tom and see, maybe brainstorm some ideas with him on what we could bring forth and say, even if it's just a resolution of support or urging,
Yes.
to get something on the record going forward to legislative session.
Yeah,
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Drews.
I know that the deadline is July 31 for getting it in, but I suspect that language could be changed or modified at a later date on that. So I think creating the document, showing the support is probably the most critical thing, with following the information that we may get back from the Helmsley study. We may be able to add or change wording in that resolution at that point in time, because they don't necessarily act on those until, they start acting on them at the convention, but I think you actually have up until probably December, at their December meeting, where you could actually make some modifications to bring current information into it.
Okay, I know the South Dakota Association votes on them September 16th and 17th. So again, the timing is just a little challenging for this. But I'm not 100% sure of the process once it gets past that. If they have the ability to amend it before it goes to the legislature, we can find out those details for sure.
I'll find that out, since I serve on that board also. I'll find out.
Sounds great.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner LaCroy, please.
I like that idea too, but Gary, I'm thinking about, if Hardin County is gonna do one, would we be better off signing up with them or trying to do having two resolutions? I mean, I guess it doesn't hurt it. You bring it to association, you can take one or the other.
Right.
Yeah, because they're only going to pass one
Yeah.
to move forward.
Yeah.
And I can reach out to the Hardin County Auditor too and get a copy of theirs. And even if ours match, that Pennington submitted one and Harding submitted one, I think the group would just vote to move forward with one, because it's going to turn into the district's bill.
Right.
Yeah.
The main thing there too is, if we're putting forth support, that means, are they coming to us in the end and saying, you supported this, hope you have some funding to help with it? Sometimes they throw that back at you when you're doing some of this, and don't get me wrong, we need to help with anything we can do with mental health, but it is a state responsibility in one sense, for some of that funding or most of that funding, and we're willing to help, but so don't take it as we're gonna do a mental health program here and we're gonna pay for it all, because that's what we have been, in the past, ending up with.
No, and I think Sheriff Tom said it best, the best way I've heard it so far on Friday when he was speaking to the Black Hills District, was that, this mental health issue is bigger than one county. It's
Yes.
bigger than one person, and everybody has to come together and work to solve the issue, so.
And that's the bottom line, Holly, is that they don't believe that it's just about us or the two
No.
counties that signed this up, that this is a state issue, this is a nation issue, so that's the only concern with us signing up and putting our name on something is, okay, you guys take the lead, now take the price of it, so, without getting help from the state.
Just to clarify, the mental health was standing on its own. Sheriff Tome is the one that presented that information on it. Where we're talking about the two counties, that's on the 2 mill, where we know that Harding County made the statement the other day that they were going to pursue trying to get that eliminated from the state statute.
Right.
And I think that's the one we also want to support, or develop our own resolution on that too.
I apologize, sir. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Holly.
Yes.
Item C.
Yes, I guess I would ask for a motion to
Okay.
direct staff to bring forth a bill or a proposed resolution on the 2 mills and a proposed resolution on mental health.
Okay, would that be a motion from
So moved.
LaCroy?
Second.
Second by Drews. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Holly. Item C, single-family residence minimum size requirement. Commissioner Ross Connect.
On April the 17th, I one of my constituents wrote a letter to the commissioners saying, hello, I'm asking all of you to review and consider rewriting the wording and requirements for a single-family residence in Pennington County. I'm referring to section 204, General District Provisions, letter 1. Number 4, the minimum dimensions of any single-family residence shall be 20 feet by 20 feet. If the above is not met, then a conditional use permit is required. If other requirements are not met, then a variance is needed. So I met with PJ, and here's kind of the nuts and bolts of this. There are two distinct zoning districts that are part of this proposal. In section 204 general district provision, all zoning districts, the requirement is 20 by 20 foot minimum dimensions of a single family residence. Section 304, mobile homes, not to include mobile homes and parks or PUDs, the requirement is 20-foot wide minimum for a mobile home, modular home, or a manufactured home. A zoning ordinance amendment to section 204 will require a deeper dive into the zoning ordinance, as amending this requirement will affect at a minimum 14 other existing zoning ordinances. A zoning ordinance to section 304 would add efficiency to the planning department, whereby allowing the approval of single-wide mobile homes with an approved building permit. With that, increased construction standards and a minimal year-round construction should be established. Amendments to both existing ordinances will take time to review and bring forward. In the end, this investment of staff time will make the process of acquiring a building permit, 1, less time consuming, 2, less expensive, and 3, easier on the landowner. So what we're trying to do is take some ordinances that just don't really fit and make amendments to them so they're more user-friendly. And PJ can probably expand on anything that I really didn't
PJ,
get
would you
into.
like to share anything?
Well, thank you. PJ Conover, Director of Planning Department. No, I think Commissioner Roskinick actually covered the staff's concerns and staff comments very well. There are two distinct sections of the ordinance, and when we met with your constituent, she was either going to buy a single-wide mobile home or looking at possibly a tiny home or a park model. So that's why I know her letter specifically mentioned 204, but we would like to also bring section 304 in. And with section 304 about the mobile homes, that requirement is that one side of the mobile home has to be a minimum of 20 feet. Well, no single wide is 20 feet, so they all require conditional use permits. Since 2013, over 30 of those conditional use permits have been brought before the Planning Commission to allow a single wide less than 20 feet on one side, and none of them have been denied. Yeah. So if we think it's time to readdress these two, and we would support Mr. Roskinick's request. And I do have a suggested verbiage for a motion if you'd like it.
Yes, sir.
Okay. To direct staff to conduct research into ordinance amendments addressing sections 204I and section 204B with the understanding that additional zoning ordinances may be required for other sections.
Is there a motion to that effect? Commissioner Roskinick, is that your motion?
That's my motion.
And is there a second?
I'll second.
Second. Motion by Roskinick, second by Drews. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you,
you.
PJ. Next, committee reports. Commissioner LaCroix.
At the Health and Humans, our Community Health Board meeting, which is pretty much basic information that we went over, the monthly stuff, monthly numbers and so forth. The other thing we had the other day was Holly and Gary Drews. We had the Black Hills Association of County Commissioners and Officials meeting last Friday up in Lead, which went very well. We had a turnout of signed up 44, but I think we had 46, and then we had lots of people that brought their spouses too, so there was actually bigger numbers. That was at the Open Cut Visitor Center, which was very good. Part of the agenda that was on there is we had a presentation. Well, first of all, we had a opening statement by and welcome from Ron Everett, the mayor of Lead, which was very good. And then we had a presentation from Sanford Lab, Constantine, they called her Ken. I had it messed up when we do it, but very good presentation about the Sanford Lab. And then we had our Sheriff Kevin Tome, who also gave update on inmate housing agreements and so forth to to everybody that was there, to all the county representatives. And we had updates from the legislative members of that district, 31, from Tim Johns and Dale Hemmick and Kurt.
Oh,
You know,
Chaffee, Kirk Chaffee.
yeah,
Chafee.
yeah. They gave their updates also. We had the South Dakota Association of County Commissioners report from Chris Jacobson. And also, I'll let Gary talk about it, but Gary and Jerry gave updates on some of the stuff that they do. Overall, it was a very well-attended meeting. Some good questions were asked that we were asked about. I asked about resolutions, people bringing them forward. So we're looking at the 19th of July is the deadline. The next meeting is going to be in Jackson County, which, well, it's scheduled for Jackson County, but when communicating with them, they want to do it in Phillip. So next meeting will be in the July 19th area, around the 19th, for all that want to attend. So the rest of it's been kind of a blank. So I don't think I've been, oh, I take that back. I mean, we had a great meeting. I'll let Gary and you guys talk about it, but the meeting with those other counties from West River,
Lincoln.
or East River, sorry.
Yeah. Thank you, Lloyd. Commissioner Roskinick.
You want me to go first? What we did last week, we hosted Lincoln County, 3 of their commissioners, a deputy state's attorney, and their county auditor came out, did a tour of the jail facility and the care campus. They are currently looking at what they're going to do as far as a jail for in the future, and they want to be able to include whatever they believe is necessary at that point in time in there. So they very much appreciated having the opportunity to come out and look at this, and it was just an enjoyable time of visiting back and forth with the commissioners and the auditor and the state's attorney, and the sheriff was here also.
Thank you. Commissioner Roskinick.
Ditto on the Lincoln County Commissioner tour. It was a great tour. I've been through the care campus twice, and if I went through there again, I'd learn more. You just can't go through that facility and pick it all up in 1 or 2 visits. And it's just a testimony that the collaboration between the city and the county and other agencies, it's making a difference. And so I was honored to be invited on that tour. And then a nice fellowship meeting afterwards and dinner at the Ramcota, where I got to meet other county commissioners. Deb and I met with the Bransky family regarding the current status of the proposed TIF out in Box Elder, and we met with folks that really know how to put together a TIF, and I was pretty impressed. And we're moving forwards with that TIF, getting more information, but that TIF, I think, is going to be a good addition to Box Elder and the community as a whole. I met with Jerome Harvey and Todd Tobin in my office. We discussed roughly a $50,000 shortfall in the budget for the fire administration department. And they explained to me more in detail how that fire administration department works with the volunteer firefighters and the district as a whole. And that's just an awful lot to comprehend, but after meeting with Todd and Jerome, I can certainly see the need for that fire administration department and the work that they do to keep all these volunteer fire departments united so that they're using the same type of equipment, that they can integrate with each other in emergency situations. And we're working on different ideas on how we can take care of that shortfall. Other than that, it was just more site visits of concerned constituents. I won't go into any details, but that was my progress in the last 2 weeks.
Thank you. Commissioner Drews?
I have nothing else.
Thank you, Commissioner Drews, for bringing Lincoln County here. We're going to try to reach out. Keystone is next, but our schedule this month looks pretty full, so we're going to try maybe next month to meet with Keystone as well. They want to meet with Commissioner Drews and I on some of their concerns and what they're doing in Keystone, maybe take a tour. So we'll be reaching out to some of the other counties and see what their concerns are in the future, but I think that's about all I have. I think everybody has explained kind of where I've been lately with them in their different meetings. So moving on. Approval of the vouchers would be number 3 or 23. If we have a motion, please.
So move.
Moved by Drews,
Second.
second by LaCroy. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
All right.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. Items from public. If not,
Send out.
we'll move out to number 25, an executive session. We need a motion to go in an executive session.
Move to go into executive session.
Thank you. Pursuant 1-25-2-1 and 125-2-3. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries.
Are you ready?
Move to come out of executive
So
session.
move.
Moved by LaCroy.
Second.
Second by Drews. All in favor, say aye.
All right.
All opposed, motion carries. Do we have a motion?
Got a motion to approve the chair's signature on the right-of-way acquisition for parcel number 144 in the amount of $4,034.17.
Motion by Drews,
Second.
second by LaCroy. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, motion carries.
Move to adjourn.
Moved by
Second.
LaCroy to adjourn, second by Drews. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right.
All opposed? I'm opposed. Let's talk a little. Motion carries.